The time on the big clock on the wall is 1 p.m. on Monday, May 25th, and I will call the special meeting of council to order. And the first item, first of all, I'd just like to say thanks to Councilor Richter and Councilor Woodward for suggesting this meeting. It's good that we can move on the patios for restaurants and licensed establishments. So I want to thank them for that. So with that, the meeting's called to order. I'd ask for an adoption and receipt of the agenda items.
So move.
Before I do that, the agenda, I'd like to move E1 to after C1. And just for everybody's information, there's a second delegation. Mr. Lance Verhoof will be on B2. So Councillor Davis moves that. Is there a seconder? Councillor Whitmarsh and Councillor Richter.
Yes, I have a comment with regards to the agenda.
Yes.
I object to this agenda on the grounds that it contains a matter that was decisively disposed of in the last meeting of council by an 8-1 vote. That wasn't 4-4 or 4-5 or 5-4, it was 8-1. And I do not understand why this is being brought back for consideration at a special meeting that 2 members of council raised for the purpose of addressing the issue of outdoor patios. And the fact that it has been added to this agenda, I find to be somewhat disrespectful and undermining of council's abilities to be able to call meetings. So I will not be supporting this agenda for those reasons. Thank you.
Thank you. And so I appreciate that, Councillor Richter. Just for everyone's information, to speak to the agenda. An agenda can be called by any members of council, as this was done, and but it becomes council's agenda. It becomes council's meeting, and certainly, as any meeting, items can be added to that agenda. And so I took the opportunity to add this more for discussion. I don't disagree with everything that was discussed. I just thought it would be valuable as we have. Excuse me, I'll have the floor. I just thought it might be valuable as we have time today to go into something that we'll be talking later. I'm not expecting we to pass first and second reading on this one today. It was more of a discussion. I thought we could all have that chat, but we'll see how it goes. And that's all. Councillor Richter, you have something else to add?
Yes, I'm just curious as to why you would even contemplate bringing back, which is a special power that the mayor has, bringing back for reconsideration a matter that was disposed of 8-1. That is a very decisive decision. And I'm very much querying why this is even on the agenda.
Well, point of order, Your Worship.
So we'll call the question on the agenda. So
let's just move on. Thank you.
I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed?
Opposed.
Councillor Richter is opposed to the agenda. So we'll move on. And we have delegations. Our first delegation is B1, Polyco Yorkson Center Incorporated. I believe Mr.
Just want to stop you there for a second. I wanted to have my opposition to the agenda registered as well.
Oh, did you vote against it, or you just
I raised my hand, yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. You have to say. Actually, it's hard for me to see all the pictures because I have. I'll just explain it so we can move on with the meeting. I have this little list of everybody's names and hide some people. So if you are opposed, I appreciate if you just state your name when I call the election call for the vote. That's very helpful. So thank you very much.
Good.
Okay.
Your Worship, may I make a point of order, please?
Yes.
Okay, so this has happened before. Can you slow down a little bit, and maybe when the vote comes, you give everybody a chance to say aye? And because I know that it goes.
I was a little hasty on the agenda because normally it's an agenda. It's not. We're not.
Yeah. Thank you.
Or anything. We're just asking an agenda. So, anyways, I'll move on.
I also, Mr. Mayor, Steve Ferguson, Councilor Ferguson. I have a quick question. Under participants, you can put a yes or no. Does that help the clerk, if I may, at all? Or?
I think with such a small group, we only have a couple of motions today. We'll just go.
Oh, I just talk about it in future. That's all.
Yeah, I know we haven't used it yet.
I've used it. I've used it all the time.
Okay.
But because I vote yes probably all the time.
Yeah, there you go.
No, okay. I just wanted to ask that question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks. Okay, so we'll go on to the delegations, and they have 5 minutes to present. And so, Mr. Carter.
Thank you, Mayor Froese and councillors. Hugh Carter here from the Polyco Group. Thank you for hearing me this afternoon to address our application for the Neighborhood Commercial Center application in Yorkson, which was the subject of first and second reading on May 15th. This is a rather unusual format, but I'll do my best. I'm sure it's the same for all of you. I'd briefly like to provide a summary of the land use planning context, urban design and development rationale behind this project. By way of background, we acquired the site in early 2017, and we're completely familiar with the fact that it was designated neighborhood commercial in the Willoughby Community Plan as well as the York's Neighborhood Plan. So our partner is a Dr. Doe who owns the corner property, and he was willing to be a participant in the application. And in return for his land on the corner, we're going to be providing him with a strata lot in the northwest corner of the project. So he has an existing dental practice in Brookswood, and he's proposing a second location here. So he's been very patient with us over the course of this process because it's taken longer than anticipated. So briefly, in terms of the land use process, we've undergone a 3-year process. We went through all the necessary steps, and the site is compliant with the Langley OCP, the Willoughby Community Plan, the York's Neighborhood Plan, and all related policies and DP guidelines. And I might add that often as applicants, we're forced to live within the letter of these neighborhood plans, and it presents it's often very challenging to meet every single detail of those plans. So to have something at this stage come up, which is addressing land use, which is a land use designation, which is a significant issue, was surprising to us. Notwithstanding the steps we've taken, we spent a year with the engineering department trying to resolve the 204th southbound access onto 80th Avenue. We did a traffic impact study, so that was a long process. We had a series of pre-application meetings starting mid-2017, formal application in May 2019, last year. Planning comments were first received in July. We responded in November with a thorough submission. Public information meeting was authorized, so we proceeded with that December 10th and had good public support. Final planning comments were resolved and a resubmission made March 24th of this year. Preliminary comments from landscaping were received in February after a submission in November and resolved by April 14th. The report went to council for first and second on May 11th. So I'd like to say that prior to the first and second reading, we did contact the planning department, Joel Nagtegal, and just to make sure everything was in order, and that the report, as he indicated, was reviewed internally and vetted by senior management, as is normally the case. And we understand that, but we always just like to make sure there's nothing that we've missed or questions that have come up. So one of the fundamental issues that has come up is whether this should be a mixed-use development site. And as I say, the neighborhood plan is very prescriptive. And it even has a diagram in the neighborhood plan that indicates what this project should look like. And our feet were held to the fire in terms of staff by saying, this is what you have to meet. We also went through an extensive redesign process because it was indicated the project had to meet a Langley heritage image or design. So we went through a significant redesign. We looked at projects throughout the township of Langley and incorporated some of those elements. Some of them even included the Coulter Berry building in Fort Langley, for example. We took some of those design elements and incorporated them into our project, including the exterior materials. We sourced some murals for 2 locations, one of them at the prime corner of 204th and 80th, and another one on the east side along 204th Street. So we spent a lot of time doing the redesign, and staff were very happy with the outcome. So to now suggest, given that we've got lower density townhomes on all 4 sides, I think I provided some images, either existing or planned, on all 4 sides, on 3 sides rather, and to the north, we got the Mormon Church. So we spent a lot of time over 3 years with the Mormon Church, and they're supportive of our application as well. And so I'm just saying that in the fullness of a 3-year process, we've done everything that's been asked of us, and we've met the neighborhood plan to the nth degree. So we feel that we satisfy the land use and guidelines and DP guidelines as set out in the township's various bylaws, and that we meet the rezoning bylaw, including parking and landscaping for the subject site. The other issue I wanted to point out was that the there was a discussion about the 80th and 204th Street intersection. We've been in discussion since early March through McElhaney Engineering and Qualico Developments, who have the application to the south of us, a townhouse development, for upgrading that signal and how we're going to do some cost sharing. So I've shared that with staff, and hopefully council, you've also seen that communication, and they've come back to us recently. So we're of the opinion that mixed use is not the appropriate designation for the site. We understand that there are better locations for mixed use, and we've got 3 of them in the Willoughby Town Center, one of them which is under application and could potentially include the Fraser Valley Regional Library. And there are certainly numerous sites along the Carville plan that have higher density along the 200th Street corridor. But the neighborhood plan designates the Willoughby Town Center for mixed use in 2 different categories of land use. The town market commercial and the commercial. Our current application is in the commercial designation. And in addition, at 208th and 83rd, which is another property that that we own, and there's a mixed use project plan for that. So
your 5 minutes is pretty much up. If you just want to wrap it up.
Thank you. Yeah. So we're certainly familiar with mixed use. We've done a lot of projects in the Willoughby Town Center, along with partners. We understand where it's appropriate and where it fits in the neighborhood plan, but we're of the opinion that our project, we would submit that our project meets the land use objectives. Thank you for listening, and we're prepared to answer any questions that council might have.
Great. Thank you very much. Councillor Richter.
Yes, I have 3 basic questions here. The first question is, after the May 11th, 2020 meeting, Mr. Carter, did you pick up the phone and initiate phone calls to any member of councils, of this council? If yes, who did you call, when, and in what order? That's the first question.
Yeah. Before I answer, I just want to comment. Mr. Carter had contacted me, and I felt when he asked me about delegation, I felt all council should be hearing what Mr. Carter had to say, and that's one of the reasons that when he suggested a delegation, I said it'd be a good idea to come here, so all council are on the same page, not just individuals. But Mr. Carter, answer.
Yes, Councillor Richter, we were obviously surprised with the outcome of the meeting on May 11th, and so yes, I did contact some councillors to try and get a sense of where this was coming from, because it literally derailed our whole process, and which we've been working hard on and for over 3 years, as I've stated. So.
And which specific councillors did you specifically call?
I don't know.
I don't know that I would like to share that right now. I have talked with
a number. I don't understand why you wouldn't share it.
Councillor Richter, he doesn't have to share this if he doesn't wish to.
I mean, I can tell you that I started with Councillor Bob Long, because he was the one that opposed the motion, and I think recognized that perhaps first and second reading met staff's recommendations.
Okay, so. Well, let me rephrase it. Did you call 5 members of council?
Councillor Richter, this isn't an interrogation.
No, this is important, Mr. Mayor.
I'm going to rule that. No, I'm ruling that question out of order. That is out of order. You can ask the delegation questions about his delegation, but cross-examining him on why he's here or what he's done in his private time is.
Well, he's here about us in our quasi-judicial role in terms of bylaws, and I think we have the right to ask the questions that we need to ask.
That's right. You have the right to ask. He doesn't have to answer. Thank you.
Well, I disagree with you, Mr. Mayor, and I'm very sorry to hear you say that. All right, my second question is, you mentioned the Willoughby Town Center, so have any Polyco applications been, or have all your Polyco applications been 100% in conformance to the neighborhood plans? Have you ever requested any variance on density or use relative to bylaws and rezonings of land use?
Thank you, Kim Richter. That's a mouthful. I'll try and walk through this. I started working on the Willoughby Town Center in about 2006, and our initial application was 2011. Obviously, we've gone through a series of applications, starting with the first application, which involved 9 parcels, and we developed those on a phased basis. There was one parcel 2, which where we sought a variation on the original rezoning, and that was because at the time the housing market was slow and we wanted to proceed with the commercial village in the core. So we relocated some of that housing density that was on parcel 2 onto 2 adjacent parcels within the Willoughby Town Center. Other than that, we fully met the terms of the Willoughby Towns, or the Yorkson Neighborhood Plan. And I'm sure Teresa Hansen, who's been involved in every application, could confirm that for us.
So there have been instances in the past where you haven't liked the neighborhood plan and you've had absolutely no qualms about asking for a variation in it.
With due respect, if I could clarify that, we had rezoning in place on the entire Willoughby Town Center, and we were simply moving some of the parts around, but still meeting that original intent of the rezoning. So no, we didn't contradict the Yorkson Neighborhood Plan. We were simply moving parts around within a master plan community.
So we can keep the questions to the issue in hand.
Well, this very much is about the issue at hand. This is about a developer who has had variances in the past because he didn't like the neighborhood plan. And in this case, he's saying, oh, he does like the neighborhood plan, so he doesn't want a variance. But council doesn't have the right to say, we don't like the neighborhood plan. No, this is very pertinent, in my opinion. My third question, he mentioned, Mr. Carter, you did mention that staff told you you had to do it. Now, did staff tell you you had to put a strip mall in there?
With due respect, it's not I understand the term strip mall. I spent 15 years of my life being a shopping center consultant. So there's a hierarchy of shopping centers, from a regional mall such as Willowbrook Mall right down to a small neighborhood shopping center. So what we did is we followed the diagram that was in the Yorkson Neighborhood Plan, and I provided that to staff, and hopefully you've got that in your package as well, which was very prescriptive in terms of what this would look like. And we've tried to satisfy that. I'd point out that I can't think of a community in the township of Langley that doesn't have a small neighborhood shopping center, whether it be, and I've been living and or developing in the township for 41 years, whether it's Brookswood or whether it's Aldergrove or whether it's Murrayville or whether it's Fort Langley or whether it's any of a number of local neighborhood opportunities, shopping centers that exist. And this isn't a strip mall, it's a village. It's the buildings, as in the diagram, are surrounding the outside, fronting the streets, with the parking in the middle, with landscaping and pedestrian linkages to adjacent projects. So
it's still a one-story. It's still a one-story mall.
Yes, and that was what was shown in the neighborhood plan. The challenge that we have is that if we go multi-story, we would not get the support of some of the adjacent users, in particular the Mormon Church, who we've had a long relationship with, and we have to go underground with the parking. And so we're satisfying the neighborhood plan by going with a single-story village, which is walkable, which is exactly what the Yorkson plan prescribes.
Well, I'm very sorry that you're caving into one particular adjacent property owner without having advised council of this as part of this application. And so I'm sorry, I think this is extremely inappropriate and I will not support anything to do with it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for your comments.
Thank you. It's keeping an open mind before the public hearing. Councillor Whitmarsh.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Carter, for coming in today and making the presentation to us today. I do think it's important to note that you have done nothing wrong by submitting a plan that fits with the Yorkson Community Plan. So that is totally appropriate. In fact, in many cases, we would like developers to submit plans that are in line with the community plan on a more regular basis. So there's nothing wrong with that. My concern the first time when we looked at it and now is around, again, the 2 stories. And I know you made a brief comment about it, but I just wanted to just a little bit further. Have you looked at some other ways in which maybe you could have, 2 or 3 structures, or one structure that would be 2-story that would still fit in within the current community plan, having commercial on the 2nd floor or not? Maybe not all buildings 2-story, but just some different ways to make better use of the land that we have and yet stay within the community plan. I'm just wondering what kind of level of investigation that has been done on that.
Thank you, Councillor Whitmarsh, for the commentary in terms of our application, and also the question regarding a 2nd or 3rd or 2-story commercial. We up until 1st and 2nd reading, there was never any indication from staff that they were looking for a higher density on this parcel. So the first we heard of it was at 1st and 2nd reading on May 11th. The question as to whether we can accommodate additional stories, as I say, we're familiar with mixed use. The challenges that we have is that this is a smaller site surrounded by 2- and 3-story townhomes and a church. And so if we go with a 2nd story, for example, of commercial, the first question that comes up is parking. Right now we've got parking that meets the bylaw. That's one issue. The second issue is that mixed use developments are a different dimension than say these buildings are 50 feet deep. A mixed use building would have to be deeper if it were residential because of the corridor and units on either side, or if it were commercial, potentially, I guess it could fit within 50 feet, but would be somewhat unconventional. So the other issue is then that we'd have to go with underground parking, which is very expensive. And the last item is with respect to a 2nd floor, we looked at the idea of putting a daycare up top, is that you've got to have elevators and emergency exits, et cetera. So it becomes it's a totally different project. It would be a complete redesign, contrary to what we've spent the last 3 years proposing through staff.
So you're saying that would be a complete redesign, even if the 2nd floor was to be sort of office space, medical space, that sort of thing, as opposed to residential. I wasn't really talking so much residential, but thinking more 2-floor commercial kind of building.
Well, I mean, there's a variety of things. There's a tremendous amount of office commercial proposed in the Willoughby Town Centre coming forward. We've got a 40,000 square foot building in our current proposal. We've had a bit of a struggle leasing our office space because of the substantial inventory of space that's existing and planned along the Carve-Oath corridor at the interchange of 86th and 200th Street, as well as some more recent projects like Vesta and next to Envision head office, et cetera. So the challenge is that from a market perspective, office over retail is not the most attractive, and so it's definitely a secondary land use, and we think there are better locations for the office density.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Davis. You're still muted.
I'm sorry. I was waiting. I saw Councillor Eric had been there before me.
Yeah,
okay.
Last.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carter, for coming out. I just, in the history of the motion, I had voted not realizing maybe the severity of the language that was on the motion to change mixed use. I know down the road on 80th on the other side of 208, one time we didn't like the cookie cutter. So we had them paint every second house red, and we've changed things like that fit form and character. But the number one thing that when there's two issues here. I voted to have the intersection done before, and I thought that's a good idea, because that can catch up to us as a township, and we don't want to be paying for things. But you've done a lot of work, you said, looking at it. So I actually voted to have it go to staff to look at different options. And I guess I didn't realize that I was actually changing it upside down. I'm concerned that we're at this point and we still have to get past what is it, a reconsideration. But I'm concerned about the big picture here. If we, do we have to change you talked about you satisfied the Willoughby plan, the Yorkson plan, the Langley OCP, heritage plan, and you had stated that staff was pleased with it. So to the point where it got here, I guess that's how. Yes. Now we're sitting here thinking, okay, well, what can we? Like Councillor Whitmore said, maybe we can meet halfway in the middle. And that tends to get kind of. It's a good idea, but I'm worried about the future plans. You said you had 3 other ones. My notes are. You had. One of 208th and 83rd. Anyhow, you had mentioned 2 or 3 other ones that you have in the pipe. And I'm concerned that that we're going to run into an issue here of maybe we need to change so that every development is a mixed use and not just say it can be a corner neighborhood, Yorkson Center.
Thank you.
So that I think they've all been comments. I don't know if I've asked any answers, but if you can pick out something, if you want to clarify. But my biggest concern is if we say no, we want you to go mixed use, we're going to have to look at the next ones that come in, and if it's in there, and staff and you are, if you're satisfying all the plans, I don't know. Maybe we either, if we're going to change, we either have to change this one, and change them all, and that's huge, because I know Mr. Backham would say that we have to. We have to probably have another public hearing and another OCP and change things. So my concern is, I voted to have it go to staff, and I'm wondering if I didn't realize how important. When we did it on May 11th, I just thought, well, Councillor Long, he always if we send it back, get more information, have a second look at it, we can improve it. And I thought that I didn't realize that we were actually going to swap ends here. So I don't know, maybe there's just comments. So anyhow, thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. I'd just like to add that in terms of the intersection at 204th and 80th, it's unfortunate that engineering staff weren't present at the time, because, or development engineering staff, because the application to the south of us has been ongoing for some time, and I think final drawings are probably in for that interchange by now from Qualico. So it's just, I understand that not all staff can be on top of all projects, but that process is well advanced, and the only challenge we have is that the southeast corner is not cooperating in terms of providing land so that we can build the ultimate. As to the NCP, I mean, the challenge we have is that we have no control over a neighborhood plan process, and of course that's a whole other public engagement process. So
yeah, well, again, I'm not a developer. If we don't have, we have a plan. I've always said, if Willoughby had stuck to the plan, then we wouldn't have so many people thinking Willoughby's about, because I know everything that comes into Willoughby has come in with a variance, almost. There's no variance on this. And I just wonder if we we got a plan, we stick to the plan. Anyhow, just comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Woodward.
I just want to make sure you can hear me. I don't.
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Can sound okay. All right. Yeah. Thanks for the delegation. I just before I ask a couple questions here, I just wanted to confirm that I am definitely not one of the councillors that was contacted in any way by Mr. Carter. I just also wanted to confirm, Mr. Carter, are you still the president of the local UDI chapter here in the Fraser Valley?
Eric, thank you for your comment. I didn't contact you, I guess, because you had made it fairly clear in the May 11th Council that you didn't want to have a presentation from the applicant or hear a presentation regarding the merits of the project. So, and it made a motion to change it. So I apologize if I should have reached out to you, but I felt that your position was fairly solid. With respect to the UDI, that's a separate issue. I've co-chaired the Langley Liaison Committee for 10 years, which is a voluntary position. I'm chair of the Fraser Valley UDI Committee, which is something that's trying to promote development and recognize our specific interests in the Fraser Valley versus for Vancouver-centric, which is UDI Pacific. And I also sit on the UDI Pacific board as a representative of the Fraser Valley. So I'm sort of the lone voice in the wilderness for the Fraser Valley communities and try and represent that well.
Okay, so I just wanted to confirm that your awareness of development in general, your experience level would be very high, and that you'd be in touch with a lot of different developers doing a lot of different projects. I think that's great. I also wanted to confirm, though, that as Mr. Mayor alluded to earlier, I'm always open to persuasion if there's new information. So my mind's not made up until I cast the final vote. But I certainly didn't hide my preference for a mixed-use walkable development in the heart of Willoughby, and I certainly still don't. I did want to ask a couple of other questions, though, regarding the process around the neighborhood plan, given that it's quite old, in the sense that in regards to the style of commercial development has evolved fairly significantly over the last few decades, where there's a lot of attention and a lot of lobbying to try to move away from more auto-oriented development to more neighborhood character, pedestrian orientation, not auto-oriented development, especially in the heart of a relatively dense area. We might define village a little differently, I think. So my question would be that if with all that experience that you have, did it not, why wouldn't it occur that maybe to communicate with staff or council on evolving from a strip mall that was designated 20 years ago, where I have a responsibility, I feel, to pursue and approve good development with more current thinking rather than 20 years ago. Did it not occur to you that maybe a strip mall wouldn't be well received?
Well, maybe I can address those in order if I can, and thank you for your comments. The neighborhood plan is old, you're correct. The Willoughby community plan in particular, I often think that maybe the neighborhood plan being Yorkson should be more applicable. Often we as developers are asked to meet both plans, and that gets challenging. But the Yorkson neighborhood plan was actually revisited shortly before we did the Willoughby Town Center. And Michael Van Housen was the planner who was working with the township on that. So it had a more recent retrofit than 20 years ago. It was probably about 10 years ago. And subsequent amendments are incorporated into the plan. So, I think it still has merit. If you look at how the Willoughby and Yorkson areas have built out, it's remarkably consistent, and that's probably, we can thank staff for that, and that it's remarkably consistent with what was envisioned in the plan. And in fact, Michael Van Housen, when we first did the Willoughby Town Center, he said, "I can't believe you're actually building what we drew, what we proposed." So I guess all plans can be improved, but I think that the neighborhood commercial site, it was very clear in the neighborhood plan in terms of what it was envisioned to be. It was meant to be something that was walkable, lower scale, service and commercial needs for those that are within a 500-meter walking radius. Dramatically different than the mixed use, high density Willoughby Town Center at 208th and 80th. And that's been consistent through all the neighborhood plans. So with respect to being auto-oriented, I guess, we all still do have cars, and we have to accommodate parking according to the zoning bylaw. Did we did we think that we could do a higher density project? To be honest, we felt that there was the density and the mixed use was designated for the Willoughby Town Center in 208th and 83rd. And between that and what was going on in Carvolth and Latimer, we thought that our proposal was what was appropriate for the neighborhood. And certainly the scale is what we believe. So we firmly believe that that's the right fit. And certainly at the public information meeting, we didn't hear otherwise.
So that's certainly a good distinction I would like to note for council, that it's not just that it's designated in the community plan, despite its age, and that your core argument being earlier that you followed the rules of the community plan, you did what staff asked you to do because they're pursuing what's in the adopted community plan, but you're also pursuing it because you believe it to be a good project?
We do. I mean, as I said, I was a shopping center consultant for 15 years of my life across the country. And I think there's a distinct hierarchy of shopping opportunities. And as I said, alluded to before, we've got Brookswood, we've got Aldergrove, we've got Fort Langley. We've got a variety of areas that have these smaller neighborhood commercial centers, and they function very well. And there's a lot of people that walk to them. So we think we think it's an excellent fit, and doesn't compete directly with the Willoughby Town Center, which was meant to be the regional center for Willoughby.
Let's touch on that a little bit, because I do have that here as one of my questions. There can be some challenges when one group controls a certain percentage of the commercial in a certain area. I think I've experienced some of those issues. But here, for example, are you pursuing an auto-oriented development that some of us may consider poor urban form and obsolete urban form because it's potentially competitive with your other properties?
I would say the audio-oriented is that with commercial, the township has a bylaw, and we have to satisfy the bylaw in terms of parking requirements. Off-site engineering, we spend, as I said, a year with the engineering department, Councillor Woodward, trying to resolve simply the deceleration or the turning lane onto 80th Avenue. That was a long process. So we've got off-site conditions as well as parking bylaws to satisfy. I don't think it's a poor urban form. In fact, I was very proud of the end product. I think staff pushed us hard in terms of the design, incorporating, brick elements, special lighting, murals. We sourced murals for the project. The colors changed, the materials. We spent a lot of time on the landscaping. So we've got pedestrian connections off 204th as well as to the townhouse development to the west. So I think it's an excellent urban form, and I think it will fit very nicely into its immediate context.
Okay, so I have another couple of questions, Mr. Mayor. I'm sorry I don't ask because I think this is very helpful, and we don't have a long agenda here this afternoon. So I appreciate the opportunity because, again, like I said, I wasn't contacted. I did have a question though. Do you consider a single-story strip mall to be an efficient land use as opposed to potentially having more residential density above it, which generates more tax revenue, has a better efficiency use of the land, a better efficient use of the servicing nearby, and in the long run is a far better economic development form for the neighborhood versus essentially a couple of single-story boxes with parking lot?
Well, I would suggest that all properties have, they go through phases. And for example, regional malls right now are going through redevelopments where they're taking the parking lot and turning that into housing and office space, et cetera, and wherever it might be. But I think for today, I think the neighborhood center is the right fit, this village in the middle of this immediate Yorkson neighborhood. In the fullness of time, maybe 20 or 30 years out, it may be time to redevelop that project in something with higher density once the entire Yorkson neighborhood fills out. I mean, we're stepping up to the mark in terms of a commercial development that I agree will generate significant tax revenue. I'm a little concerned right now with the current tenor of the times as to where the market's going to be, both for commercial and housing, with what's going on in the world and in Langley specifically. So we're stepping forward and proposing a commercial development that'll be a good tax generator.
Yeah, I think my point was that more floor area generates more tax, so it could potentially have been a bigger tax generator. And I do have one last question, and that is, around the process that you talked about in terms of the mixed use versus not. So, around some of those parking challenges and so on. So I want to confirm, would you say that you would build a better development if you were potentially given some relaxation on the parking requirements for commercial uses?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I've had experience in the past with neighborhood shopping centers with a second floor of office. And to be honest, in the smaller scale properties, my experience is that there's a real conflict between the parking for the commercial tenants on the ground floor and the upper floors, and it actually is a negative in that scale. So I've seen the opposite, where by putting a second floor and not providing sufficient parking, you're actually starving the commercial tenants at grade. And so it's the worst of both worlds. It doesn't satisfy the neighborhood commercial tenants, and the office tenants on the second floor are consuming the parking. So I don't see that you don't see a lot of these two-story centers being developed these days. So I still think that we've got a good solution, and there are other locations that are better for office space, whether it's the Willoughby Town Center or the 200th Street corridor.
Okay, well, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, I promise you this is the last one.
Okay.
But I just want to respond. I want to be clear, I'm not advocating for a two-story retail office building. I'll leave others to advocate for that. I'm advocating for a true mixed-use development. And I wanted to ask too, so the potential land lift from a single-story strip mall development to a mixed-use development where people live above the commercial and walk to it, neighbors walk to it. It's a building that isn't a strip mall, and it provides for a better neighborhood. People will care about all the things that we've been talking about when we made this vote. Why wouldn't you want to work with us on a potential development which would be a significant raise in land lift and density for you to pursue, potentially in partnership with the municipality, maybe some sort of land lift contribution? Why would you be resisting making more money?
Well, I mean, we could spend an hour discussing that, Councillor Woodward, but I can give you a specific case in point. When we developed the Kensington and the Willoughby Town Center, parcel 4, the residential was actually a money loser. So the residential on top lost money, but we proceeded with the form of development because that's what was in the neighborhood plan, and that was what was in the zoning for the Willoughby Town Center. The commercial is where the money was. So I don't agree that there's a significant land lift by adding residential on top. So, I mean, that's my personal experience, and we're now underway with parcel 3 in the Willoughby Town Center, and conditions haven't changed that dramatically. We're facing a similar scenario there. So these mixed-use projects do not always generate more revenue in terms of the residual land. They do generate more density, granted, but they don't generate more residual value to the land. So,
okay, well, I'll just leave it there, Mr. Mayor. I obviously disagree with that statement, given my own experience, but I'll leave it there for that alternative viewpoint to remain. Well, thank you,
Councillor Woodward. If I could just finish on the point, is that we've gone through. We're on our 3rd project right now in the Willoughby Town Center, and I can assure you that that's been the experience in every single case. I mean, the challenge with the mixed-use development is it's not just a matter of putting more floors on top. As you might know, you did the Coulter-Berry building, is that you've got to build a structural slab on top of the retail, which is a significant cost. Plus, you have to go with the underground parking, which is probably $40,000 per stall, and the additional traffic that entails. So there are significant costs to mixed-use development that drive up the costs in comparison to, say, a simple 4-story or 6-story apartment down the road, like Polygon's building. So the costs are higher, and the revenues don't, at least on the residential, don't really add any value. So anyway, that's been my experience in the immediate neighborhood. So
okay, I just want to add, Mr. And again, I'm not going to belabor the point, but I want to note and remind for council's attention the similar project being built across the street from the Costco and the Township Town Hall. Maybe drive by there once in a while. that is a mixed-use project that seems to be doing just fine.
Fair enough. Yeah, thank you. Councillor Ferguson. Councillor Ferguson, you might be muted. You're muted. We don't hear you. Councillor, okay, you're not muted, it shows, but we still can't hear you. Is there, okay, I need some technical help here. You're talking, but no one's listening. So maybe there's a setting.
That's normal.
You might be, might be a setting in your computer for a different mic, but we'll go on to Councillor Kunst and come back to Councillor Ferguson. Councillor Kunst?
Hi there. Yes, thanks for your delegation. I had a question about what is the concern of the Mormon Church for mixed-use development, and what have they expressed as far as how that land should be used?
Thank you, Councillor Kunst, for the question. I've been involved in one project directly across, two projects now directly across the Mormon Church. The first one I was at Qualico to the north. And there was a lot of sensitivity in terms of the design and scale and materials on those properties that were being developed by Qualico and Foxbridge Homes. And secondly, Polygon to the east went through a significant sort of trial and error period to get their design right for the Mormon Church's wishes. We've had discussions with the Mormon Church and have been able to bring them on board in terms of our concept, and they've been actually very supportive in terms of this being a good opportunity for sort of after functions at the church for people to go next door and go to a restaurant or shopping or whatever the case may be. They can walk next door. So and they're also, I think, supportive of the single story because it doesn't create a project that's sort of looking in their backyard. In terms of the mixed use, I mean, this is all new as of May 11th, so it's all new to them. I've reached out to them, but things have to go to Salt Lake City, so I don't have an exact anything in writing for you, but I think they're supportive of what we proposed.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Ferguson, how's your mic working now? You try unmuting.
Can you hear me yet?
There you go. Yeah, we got you. You're on.
Okay, maybe I was enjoying not hearing anything the whole meeting. No, that's not the case. Thank you for coming, Mr. Carter. I did want to say, as far as mentioning the name Michael Van Hoosen, I know that he is well respected in the field. In fact, I was going to give him a call about this and other issues. Also, he's a university professor, and some of our planners have even been students of his. So that's a good source. I did want to, my first question is on your 3 years to get the application going. You're looking at May in 2019, July, November, December, and then of course in March, February, and May, of course, in 2020. When you didn't mention any other dates going back to 3 years, Mr. Carter. Was there other times where you met with staff?
Well, we met with staff before acquiring the property, which is sort of your typical due diligence to try and confirm what the land use is. And we had a series of pre-application meetings throughout 2017 and 2018. We actually started out with a different architect initially, and then they wound their company down in Canada. So we moved over to Urban Design Group because we like what they do. But we spent a year just trying to get the site plan set and the building locations and the entrance off 204th with engineering. So that was 2017, all of 2017.
Okay, and going back to, I know mixed use, you get 10 people in the room, you get 10 different answers on mixed use. Also, you might want to comment with your experience. It depends on location, it depends on design, it depends on, as you just mentioned, parking. But I know that Willoughby Town Center and others have put parking behind on a second floor on top without going below. Have you considered that? Or I know the challenges, but have you considered that?
Well, in the Willoughby Town Center, we call that, that came out of a conference I went to years ago in Chicago. They call it a Texas wrap, but where you've got the second floor deck, which is a more cost-effective way of providing parking, and it actually improves the marketability of the second floor. So it's sort of a win-win. The challenge that you've got is that you need quite a bit of land to accomplish that in terms of depth of the property. So plus you need ramps up and down. So it's not inexpensive, but it's a unique solution that works in some mixed use properties.
Okay, and that's okay. And see, things always come up between a lot size and your mixed use and the profitability of mixed use. And again, that's all location as well. And as I say, you get 10 planners or 10 consultants, you have different ones. I did want to say regarding the Mormon church, I guess they've had concerns in the past with too much density surrounding them. I guess everywhere, every day they show up, there's some new construction around until it's all finished. Your questions with the Mormon church, did they continue saying they didn't want any more density?
Well, as I say, I apprised them of this after the May 11th meeting that mixed use was being proposed at the council table, and I said, as I shared with them, this is not what we proposed, and shared with them the details in terms of what the motion was, and asked for their response. I have not heard back yet, but I know they've always been sensitive to what's facing their temple, as well as the I guess, what do they call it? The chapel, I guess, where they meet on Sundays. They've always been sensitive to that in terms of what's overlooking their property. And I'm suspecting, having talked to Colin, who's the local pastor, I think he expressed that there would be some concerns there, but he's checking with their people in in Idaho, Salt Lake City.
Yeah, I understand. With the amount of money, time, and energy that they put into that site, I'm sure that they're very cognizant and aware of what's going on. My last question is the property at 208 and 83rd that's, I guess, vented, you said, for mixed use. Is that your development as well?
That's a challenging site unto itself, because it has an S-shaped road that comes through the middle of it. But Polyco is working in conjunction with Quadra Homes. I think council's actually had a presentation in that regard in terms of trying to find an adequate transportation solution for that roadway connecting to 208th and with a couple of roundabouts. And so that site's always been designated mixed use in the neighborhood plan, as well as the Willoughby Town Center.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Carter.
Thank you.
Councilor Richter, I see your hand is up. Did you have another question, or was that from before?
No, I have some additional questions based on the discussion that has occurred. So I just want to make sure that I understand this. This is a 2.5 acre property on 80th Avenue, which is 4 blocks in from 200th Street and virtually kitty corner to the Langley Event Center. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's on 80th and 204. Yeah.
Okay, so it's very close to the Langley Event Center and not very far from 200th Street, where we are putting high density development in. Now, the expected lifespan of this strip mall, Mr. Carter mentioned that it would be 30 to 40 years. I think 60 to 80 years is probably more realistic, isn't it?
I don't know. I guess it depends on what's happening in the marketplace. So.
Well, we know that with COVID that there are probably going to be some very significant changes in the marketplace relative to commercial. We're already seeing the results of that with the closures of many large commercial buildings or many large commercial companies. So if this one-story strip mall is surrounded by high rises, how is this going to fit in? Like, you call it a village, but it's not a village. It's a one-story mall that could potentially be surrounded. I mean, on 200th Street, we've put in towers as high as 28 stories. And so that 2.5 acres of one-story development is going to be there for 60 to 80 years. Does that make for a walkable, livable community?
Mr. Carter said it'd be there for 60, 80, or 80 years. It depends on the market. So if the market is high rise in that area, I'm sure as we've
But
seen
this
other
is
cities,
greenfield. It isn't even built yet.
as we've seen other cities and other developments, a lower density is put in place until the market is ready for a higher density, and that happens. I'm just not saying it'll happen here, but it does happen throughout the region, and I think that's what Mr. Carter was alluding to. Mr. Carter.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Ferguson. I don't know what the timeline would be for redevelopment, Councillor Richter, but I can say that it's not really kitty corner to the Langley Event Center. The Langley Event Center is 3 blocks to the west. I understand the density in the Carvolth plan because you're on a major arterial road connected to the interchange. So I get the density in that location, and that's consistent with the Latimer and the Carvolth plans. But this site is not going to be surrounded by high rises.
How do you know that?
Well,
we don't know that.
Because Polygon and trying to recall the other one have developed to the east. They've developed 2 and 3 story townhomes have just been built and occupied in the last 2 years. Actually, the last year, some of them. Directly across the street, Qualico and Streetside are proposing 2 to 3 story townhomes. The southeast corner has been acquired by another developer that we know, and they're looking to do 2 to 3 story townhomes. So, and the church.
Well, doesn't that fit with the argument of we should be looking to do mixed use 2 to 3 stories so it fits in?
Actually, I would suggest that it's the opposite. Is that I think if we develop this with a 6 story mixed use building, it's going to sit in the midst of low density housing around it, and the neighborhood's going to have significant issues with it. And if I were living in one of those townhouses that I bought from Polygon across the street, I'd be concerned if there's now a 6 story building going across the street when that was never
one story just doesn't make sense to me in that particular location. And it is. I mean, you can say it's 4 streets in from 200th Street, which is a high density corridor. And you're right, it is on an arterial road. You've mentioned the cost of underground parking 3 times.
Yes.
Okay, so this is about cost for you. It's not about the livability of the neighborhood 80 years from now. It's about the cost of putting underground parking in.
No, what I was trying to explain, Councillor Richter, is that mixed use has its own set of cost implications, and those costs can or cannot be justified in certain locations. In the Willoughby Town Centre, where there's a commercial core, and you've got high density housing all around it, within a block or 2, it makes a lot of sense to do mixed use. In this location, in my view, it's not appropriate for office space because of all the competition that's coming on the Willoughby Town Centre and along the Carvolth corridor. So office space is not an option. Housing, we've got plenty of housing coming into the Willoughby Town Centre along the 208th Street corridor, as well as in Carvolth and Latimer. So this isn't about cost. What I'm trying to explain is that there's an equation when you're doing mixed use development where if you can get sufficient scale, perhaps the economics work. But in a situation like this, it's not appropriate because I don't believe it's a viable project as proposed.
Which is not a viable project. What you're proposing, and you're proposing it strictly from an economic perspective because of the cost of underground parking, right?
No, I've given you all the land use and development rationale behind our proposal. What I'm suggesting is that the cost of putting a mixed use development in this particular location is neither appropriate nor feasible.
Not when it's that close to LEC. Okay.
Thank you.
So I want to go back to a question that I asked earlier, which I don't think I got an answer to, and that is, can we expect all future Polyco applications to adhere 100% to the neighborhood plans with no variations ever being requested again?
I think I'll have to step in. I don't think he can answer that. Mr. Carter, I believe, is an employee of Polyco, but may not be in the future, and I don't think he has the authority to make that sort of a statement, so I don't think he needs to.
Well, he's here representing the company today.
But you can't make that kind of answer. That's binding on a company, and there may be a very good reason that council would like to see an OCP amendment, as that we would want.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and Mr. Mayor, I just want to point out that council is allowed to be predisposed one way or another towards an application, particularly before it hits the public hearing. This has not hit the public hearing, and I fully understand that a councillor must have an open mind once a public hearing begins. But in my opinion, this should not even be going for public hearing.
We're not voting on it now. Thank you. Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Carter, for providing that information. I think it was enlightening for council, at least it was for me. But it was most important for me is that all members of council got the same information. And I do appreciate you making the suggestion to come out as a delegation and speaking.
Thank you for your consideration and have a good day.
Thank you.
By the way, don't forget the Willoughby Town Center when you're talking about expanding onto the streets.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, thanks. So we'll wait for staff to prepare the delegation terminal for the next delegation, Mr. Verhoof. While we're waiting, I am getting a haircut on June the 2nd for everybody's information. In case
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to raise a point. So before the next delegate begins, I'd like to review the update that I've received from staff as of late Friday regarding my conflict of interest position potentially has evolved on this issue.
Okay.
And I wanted to just give a quick statement to council and give them an update.
Sure.
When Councillor Richter and I both initially requested the special meeting for the purposes of assisting microbreweries, that's exactly what it was for. It was in response to the inquiry given for assistance by Mr. Pratt, if you recall that correspondence. Mm-hmm. And that led directly to calling of the special meeting. Unfortunately, it turns out that the notice of motion added to the agenda by Councillor Long expands the scope of the conversation to include food service as well, in addition to the original intent, which was microbreweries, of which I have no interest. Given that it looks like it'll be extended the conversation to include food service, I will be declaring on a cautionary basis to be 100% on the squeaky side of this. I will be declaring a conflict, even though there's some gray area, but I will be declaring a conflict of interest on this, which will include the delegations and the consideration of the items. So it's possible to declare that now in regards to this delegation and any other regarding this. And then if that item could be discussed, and then I can be brought back for the strip mall item.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I have a point of order here.
Sure, what's your point of order? And then I'll add some clarification here. Yeah.
Is there no way that this motion that Councillor Long has put forward could not be divided so that restaurants could be separated out and that Councillor Woodward can be allowed to participate in the discussions around cafes, breweries, wineries, distilleries, cideries, and then pubs and restaurants would be separate?
Okay. I believe that will be up to Councillor Woodward. I don't know if the differentiation, these are licensed premises, and one licensed premise, you know, I can't answer that. It's only up to Councillor Woodward if he feels that by separating restaurants out because it's one type of licensed premise.
You know, I think that if, Mr. Mayor, I think that if this was a controversial item, that potentially we could defer it for a full legal opinion. But given the case that it's my assumption that council will be supportive of assisting local business. That you know, I think it's just to be on the cautionary note, I'll declare a conflict for the entire scope of it, given that I believe there'll be some crossover, which will be inevitable between the two discussions. I appreciate Councillor Richter's attempt, but because I do believe to some extent some of these legal opinions are rather expansive, but I think that they're doing us a favor in that regard, and it's best to edge on the side of caution. So I'll declare a conflict, Mr. Mayor, if that's okay with you. Yep.
Fair enough. And so just excuse us for a second, Mr. Verhoof. So we are going to go through these items dealing with this particular topic next after the delegation. And there was the
notice of motion as well, right? If we could deal with that. And then,
yes. So there's I just want to help speed this thing up. So under so other businesses move forward. So under the items from prior meetings is the reconsideration. So rather than you having to wait to the end of this, then come back in, perhaps if council allows me, I'll deal with that very quickly. And I don't think there'll be much discussion after you hear what I have to say, and then we can carry on with this topic. So
sorry, just bring me up to speed again. I'm sorry.
Basically, if with council's indulgence, it won't take me long. I can go straight to the items of prior meetings, and I'm going to deal with it real quick. There won't be any votes. Basically, I want to based on the information I heard from Mr. Carter, I don't think we need to do reconsideration. I've talked to Mr. Back, and the motions that are there, we can deal with at the next meeting with motion. I think our staff have received a lot of information. Our council has received a lot of information. I believe it's in our best interest, after hearing this lengthy delegation, that we ruminate on it until the next meeting. And I don't, so I'm withdrawing the reconsideration.
Oh, okay, okay.
So I will be doing that. So Councillor Woodward, if you have to declare, you don't have to come back in again. So that's all I want to say. Okay. And I think you are.
Somebody keeps muting me here. Yeah.
Sorry.
I don't mind.
Councillor Woodward, go ahead.
I don't mind waiting around, because potentially
okay, sure.
that would have to be a
watch
vote. Yeah. So I would like to be recorded for that.
Fair enough. Yeah, fair enough.
So I'll come back. I'll wait around. I've got other things I can do here and wait.
Yeah, Councillor Long, you point of order, or you got your hand?
All right. Well, thank you, Worship. If you're going to actually withdraw that, I didn't make comment when Mr. Carter was here, because
then we'll go. Yeah,
reserve my comments for when we discuss the motion, but I do want to say something.
Sure. Why don't we do that in other business then, if you want?
Well, I think we can conclude it.
Okay,
now.
so make your comment. I don't want to get into a discussion on it, because
I would have made the comment with Mr. If I'd known you were going to withdraw it, I would have made it with Mr.
Okay.
Carter in the room, and I hope you can still hear me, because I did feel that, that his treatment by this council was a little bit disparaging. Yeah. And anyhow, there's that about it, but also I think the wording of the motion is what really has caused an issue, and Councillor Davis talked about that.
That's
too.
Right. And that can be dealt with by motion at the next meeting if we wish to change it. It doesn't need a
I suppose, except I under new business, then I might bring it up, because the way the motion is worded, it doesn't seem to give much on.
Well, I'll definitely.
Thanks.
I'll definitely come back then, Mr. Mayor, given that any other business may be raised as well. So I'll wait and come back if that's okay.
I'd like to move. I don't want to discuss that. We can discuss it then in other business, but I just wanted to let council know my intent after hearing that delegation. So, okay.
Okay, but Mayor Froese, I'm still not clear. Are we withdrawing D1 or discussing it after this delegation?
D1. D1 is not being withdrawn. It's just that when I get to it, I'm not going to be proceeding. That's all. So I just want to let you know. We can, if there's any comments, that can be done in other business.
Till the next meeting.
Yeah, or this meeting. So, okay, let's move on with the delegation. He's been waiting patiently. Mr. Verhoof.
So someone's gonna put me in the waiting room?
Yeah.
Okay.
That'll happen, Ms. Bauer. Okay. Okay, Mr. Verhoof. Oh, just wait a second. I lost Mr. Verhoof. All right, he's up, Mr. Verhoof, and Councilor Woodward is still showing there. Oh, okay, I see. I'll wait for you to give me the heads up. There he is. Okay, Mr. Verhoof, you're good to go. Thanks. And you're muted. You have to unmute.
Okay.
There you go. Yeah.
Everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you for your time, Mayor and Council. I appreciate that my delegation is a tad more menial than the previous, so I won't take up as much time as was needed for that one. Yeah, I just wanted to thank Councillor Woodward and Councillor Richter for putting forward a recommendation to have the Township Council look into extending service areas for the Township of Langley. And when I talk about that, I am discussing basically all licensees that are able to operate in this phase 2 of the reopening plan, which would include food primary and liquor primary and manufacturers altogether. Although the letter that I was part of did come from all the breweries as a collective group via Michael Pratt, and suggesting that the township look into allowing for those particular businesses, but I don't think exclusive to other food primary or any liquor primary licensees to consider extension of service. So I just want to thank you all for your time to consider this matter. Of course, through COVID, our hospitality industry has been hit hard. There will be lots of restaurants and bars and hospitality groups that will not make it through this, and I've heard a lot of situations like that already, and it's very tough. For Trading Post, in general, we operate 2 locations in the township of Langley, the brewery, where we manufacture their beers on 64th Ave with a 60-person lounge endorsement. And then we have a 100-person food primary location in Fort Langley. And the ability for us to extend a service into potentially public spaces, whether they be on public or private property, it would be huge for both the operator, but also for the staff and customers coming into our restaurants in this new time. We opened last Thursday, and we have seen a lot of positive comments, but we've also taken matters very seriously in being able to socially distance ourselves from table to table, as well as servers being in masks and gloves and all that. So our revenue over the last 2 months during the COVID period dropped 80%, 80. And that was with us even being scrappy and doing things like takeout and beer deliveries to people's homes. So, you know, you can imagine some other restaurants that didn't do any type of extra service were essentially shut down. As you might know, on Friday, the LCRB, the liquor board, released an online portal for licensees that are operating right now to be able to apply to the liquor board for an extension of service. And so they made it very easy to do this, which I believe they're going to be turning around in a matter of weeks instead of a matter of months. Normally for this process, someone like myself, if I wanted to increase my my patio, I would have to go through something called a structural change permit to the LCRB. And those usually take about 6 months of back and forth between the liquor board and the municipality. So they're trying to expedite this for all types of licensees during this time. And the extension that they put in goes until October 31st, 2020. So that is the temporary extension that they've put on this. And the other big thing to note, which you may all be aware, is that this type of extension does not include an occupancy increase. It will only be for space. And I think that's important to note, as most structural changes are looking for an occupancy increase. I've read the memo that went out in regards to rules and regulations and thoughts put in for extensions going onto sidewalks and public versus private spaces. And I think that they are all in line with what a lot of hospitality groups would like to see in being able to service their customers in a safe and distant way. The 2 items that I would like to see potentially reconsidered in that memo is to change the noise bylaw from 10 p.m. to 11 p.m. And the other one is to have the date that is discussed in the memo from the township refers a couple times to the end of September. And I would like to see that changed to the end of October 31st, which is in line with what the LCRB has come out with last Friday. So yeah, just wanted to come here to represent not only the breweries, but also all liquor licensees that would be looking to benefit from a safety perspective, to have customers feel more comfortable coming in to eat and dine and create community in a very safe way. So thank you for your time, and I appreciate the consideration.
I got to unmute myself. There, thanks. I have a couple questions. The memo you're referring to, have you seen the one that was issued today? It came out quite late, so May 25th memo?
Likely not.
Okay.
I received an email from Michael Pratt, who I believe received it from staff on Friday.
So we'll go into this when we have our discussion. But I believe the date is in here, October 31st. The only date that's September 30th is for staff to report back to council, and it wouldn't be a change. So hopefully with that, it should be okay. Very good. Then the 10 p.m. to 11 p.m., that'll be a separate discussion, but I appreciate your input, based on your experience in the field in that industry. So thank you very much. There's several members of council with some questions. Councillor Richter's first.
Yes, thank you. Now, I take it, have reopened, have you? Okay, now what are your wait times like? right now?
We opened on Thursday and we did a bit of a soft launch, so we didn't have much wait on Thursday, although we did go on a wait list for dinner, but only for about 20 minutes. Friday and Saturday, and I'm speaking specifically of Fort Langley right now, Councillor Richter, our wait times got up to about an hour and a half to 2 hours for dinner service.
Oh my goodness, yeah. And my children had ventured out to a facility in Langley down in Willoughby and ran into the same kind of wait time. So the loss of occupancy is what's driving those wait times, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, you have a parking lot there that you can use?
Correct. We're fortunate enough in Fort Langley that we have a 7-stall parking lot that also has our garbage enclosure on it. That is part of our own property. So we feel pretty fortunate to have the space potentially used for extra spaced out seating.
Okay, so you would like to use your parking lot as opposed to the street parking, correct? Or do you want both?
For me personally, I think the parking lot would be enough. There would potentially be some space out front, and I don't know where the property line lands, but that you could put maybe a 2-top up front. But no, for me personally, I'm looking just for the parking lot in the back.
For the parking lot, yeah, because we know in Fort Langley where it's already got reduced parking requirements that taking away street parking in Fort Langley anyway might be a very big problem for other retailers and commercial venues. Okay, now the process that exists right now requires council approvals and development fees. Are you requesting that those approvals and fees be suspended in their entirety?
Yes, thanks for the question. Because these are temporary changes, then yes, I am requesting that the fees be waived. If they are, the ideal situation for me through this time has opened my eyes that, hey, maybe we could use our back parking lot in Fort Langley permanently into some sort of patio space. And that would require a structural change policy because we would actually have to increase our occupant load. And for that, I don't see why fees should be waived. I think that's a permanent request, not a temporary request. But for the matter right now, until October 31st, these are all temporary requests.
Okay, so these are temporary requests just to run to the end of October. Now, you did mention the noise bylaw from 10 to 11 p.m. Are you suggesting that for every day of the week or just for some days of the week?
Every day.
Every day, okay. And have you had any problems with noise complaints in the past?
We have had a couple phone calls for more mistakes than anything. The staff like to play music after service is done, and we've accidentally blasted it on the patio. But other than regular service and the odd mistake, no.
Okay. And also, we were contacted by other members of your industry, and one of those, and not just a brewery, but also wineries and so on, has suggested that if facilities have special event areas, that this use of special event areas also be included. Are you in agreement with that?
I think if they can operate it from a level that is not too far away, being adjacent to where their license is, I don't see an issue with that. I look at some of the wineries and even the cideries down on 16th Ave, and the one that comes to mind is Fraser Valley Cider Company. They have a lot of beautiful space that could be used that they normally do for special events that's used in this temporary consideration.
Okay, thank you very much for your delegation today. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Councillor Long.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Mr. Berhoff, for coming, and appreciated your comments. Now, I just have a couple of questions about the capacity of your establishment. How many seats are you? What's your capacity currently? Because the new law says you can have 50%. Is that correct?
Correct. So we have 100 seat capacity in Fort Langley. So right now we are down to 50 seats.
Okay, and so with the 50 seats, you'll never be able to change that, right?
Correct. This is where I think that changes may continue to evolve. For me personally, in Fort Langley, we have been able to put 50 seats in a socially distant way in our own inside and outside on our existing patio. So we are already at our max in terms of capacity. Now, what I think will arise is, okay, I've got 50 seats inside. I could put some of those and space out even more inside to the parking lot. But I think what we're going to see is a request from a lot of hospitality groups to potentially make that 50% a little bit more lenient, as long as they can socially distance tables. And I can tell you from, reading the LCRB and the public health orders almost daily, that way of methodology of spreading out tables changed about 5 times in the last 2 weeks. So I think that they're just trying to navigate what's going to work and what's not. But yes, to answer your question, we are already at our 50-person occupancy, which is
okay. So you're anticipating some changes, and of course, in the environment that we're in, it seems to be changing hourly, yes. Almost in full respect. So you're sort of anticipating a change, and I think for council's consideration too, that one of the advantages of this initiative is to get people outdoors, which is what Dr. Henry has been talking about. So even though you can technically put your 50 inside, if you put more patio seats out, you'll probably find that people will be drawn to that because of the safety of being outdoors. And then if things get moved around, then you'd be able to increase your capacity. That's all I had. And thanks very much. Yeah, you should get a hold of this new memo because it's got a lot of new stuff in it.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
We'll get it to you. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah. Councilor Arneson.
Yes, thank you, Worship. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Verhoff, for coming today. I really appreciate it. I'm sure the rest of council also appreciates the fact that we're hearing from somebody who is a very vital part of our community doing a business that's been affected, because I always think that you're in the best position really to give us some guidance over, unlike other areas where we usually have a lot of time and a policy evolves in a very, I guess, evolutionary kind of way and incremental. Now we're suddenly looking at these changes, and as we've indicated, they're happening quite rapidly. So it's good to be able to pre-consider some of them, but I do have to assume that many of them will change over time. It depends on which time frame you're focusing on. So if I could just go back to a couple of your comments and maybe throw in some of my own notes. So the Trading Post, you're looking at changing the noise bylaw to be able to open till 11. And I've been to your establishment a few times. I'm wondering if there might be any merit to have you considered opening earlier to have more of a format for a different type of food venue, just to expand it. I'm not saying not to do it till 11, but have something earlier during the day.
Yeah, thank you for your comments and questions. To answer your question, yes, we have. We've explored a variety of different things, and one of the ideas that came out of our location in Fort Langley is to put a pickup window in. So because we obviously can't seat our inside as full as we'd like, we cornered off some space and created one of our windows to be a strictly pickup window. So now people can order online from our website and can use that space to bring their food home or to the park. So to answer your question, yes, we have thought of different ways of selling in order. And my comment related to the 10 versus 11 is we just feel that people, especially during the summertime, when the sun and the light is later, people might be a little upset that they cannot be out there in a reasonable setting from a noise perspective until 11. So it's not going to be a make or break if it's 10 or 11, but I just think that would be a bit of a more of a reasonable time frame, considering that we're a relatively quiet venue, obviously not a nightclub and blaring music, but that would be nice for people to be able to be out there until just over 10 o'clock and pushing to 11.
Yeah, A follow-up question has to do with this calculus. I many years ago worked in the restaurant industry, and I know that the margins are often very slim. And so I'm wondering the degree to which, and I do agree in principle that we should waive all the fees associated with these things, because there will be infrastructure costs, I'm assuming, that you'll have to assume in order to expand the scope of your operation. So I did understand the logic of that. And also, I wrote down in my notes while you were speaking this idea of creating a level playing field, because part of my challenge is to consider these one by one. And if you're one of the first adopters, let's say, of this, and the implications that there could be as a domino effect for others that will be affected in your streetscape, so that if you're taking up parking, for example, that will have implications for maybe others. So just, I think we need to have some awareness about how to be fair and transparent in the event that something like that does take place. You don't need to comment on that, just something, to consider, because I do think there'll be a lot of uptake for this. And I do think that we need to consider something along those lines. And just one final thought. I wondered what you thought about the idea. Other communities have designated one staff resource person to be the go-to person for all of the questions having to do with this process, to streamline that. And I wondered if you thought that that would be helpful in the township.
Yeah, thanks for your comments and questions. To answer your last question really quick, yeah, I think it would be helpful. When we started inquiring with this, I just called the township and got in touch with Teresa Hansen and her staff, and so I wasn't quite sure who to go to. So I think if there is someone that can has a very good understanding of what this situation is, that would be helpful. To answer your middle question, yes, I agree that we need to be careful on setting a precedent. I think that in terms of the hospitality industry, being able to have safe seating to gain customer confidence to go out and enjoy a meal and some beverages is important. And I think that there's still a lot of people. I read a poll that there was still about 82% of people that don't feel comfortable going into a restaurant environment. So I feel like having more outdoor space would ease that comfortability quite a bit, especially for restaurants that don't have any patio space right now. And I can think of a lot of situations like that. I feel very fortunate that we have a large parking lot that is our property adjacent to our building. So we're in a bit of a unique situation where a lot of restaurants will just have the streetscape. So that might be a little bit more difficult. And it kind of goes in line with your first comment is I do actually think with the standards, they almost need to be considered on a case-by-case basis, because every landscape is different for each license. And I think to have the rules and regulations in line are good, but I don't know how otherwise to do it than to kind of be looking at this as a case-by-case basis. But I've got to imagine that there's going to be a lot of applications, and I've already submitted my application to the liquor board for this. So I think that there's going to be a lot of applications in the township for similar ideas.
Thank you very much for your delegation. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whitmarsh.
Hello there. Thanks, Mr. Verhoef, for your presentation and coming to meet with us today. My question is, I'm wondering that I know you've been working with staff on this issue specifically for your establishment, and I'm wondering what kinds of things do you think that are able to be done just through staff, and that it's moving along with staff, and what needs to change from a council perspective from it seems to me that a lot of what you're asking staff's actually able to already do, and the ministry's allowed us to do it. And I'm trying to get a distinction between what can staff already do and what is needed from council to allow staff to do more to help you.
Yeah, good question. I think even having this meeting on the Monday after the the online portal from the liquor board came out on the Friday is already a really great step in the right direction. And as you mentioned, there's a lot of things that staff can do, especially for private property that are already in place. So to answer your question, I think just the support of the hospitality industry, and not only for manufacturers but also for all licensees that are able to operate in this new phase, in phase 2 from the PHO, to be able to be considered and have some lenience around different bylaws to expand their ability to serve guests in a very comfortable way. So I think the support of that and the lenience around some bylaws that may be more heavily weighted in what I'd call normal times to operate in a safe way.
Okay, that's helpful. One other question is, you commented that you felt that every establishment had some unique situations to it and unique property, where they're situated and so on, and that having sort of a one-size-fits-all policy might not be the best, that maybe it might be best to look at each one individually, obviously move as quickly as possible, but to be able to assess each one individually. Is that a fair statement of what you said, or am I misunderstanding that?
No, you heard correctly. I think ideally a blanket way of saying, hey, operator, if you can hit this criteria of the highway use permit and making sure that people can get by safely and set out a variety of guidelines, maybe we don't need to look at it as a case-by-case basis, but a set of guidelines that people would have to follow in order to make sure that they've thought of all of the ramifications of public safety would also work. But I'm trying to think of an example of a restaurant that might have a bit more difficult time gaining space. And so if I think of Little Donkey in Fort Langley, the burrito place, they have a small patio, but they could potentially go onto what I would consider a large sidewalk on the Mavis Road. And so those types of considerations are different in every situation, because that's public land where my parking lot in Fort Langley is private. So I think that as long as the hospitality group can fit within the guidelines that are already put in the memo, and I haven't seen the most recent one, but I think that would be ideal just from a timeliness and a cost perspective from the township.
Right. Okay, that's excellent. Thanks very much.
Welcome.
Thanks, Councillor Davis.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming, Lance. Lance, I'll be really quick. I'm concerned, and I want to ask you this because you're a delegation. After this, we're going to look at what we're going to do for the relaxing or whatever it is that we need to do. You had mentioned you're lucky, you have a parking lot. What's your opinion on, you had expressed you wanted to, or maybe it was Councillor Arneson's idea, expand your operation or your scope. We go into the parking lot, we open a big can of worms. What happens on October 31st? How are you going to take that when we say, okay, well, this is good till, and then we make another extension, and there's not just you, all the restaurants, the pubs, and I'm not, I would sometimes much rather eat on a patio than I would in maybe not when it's cold. But so now that we open it, what are the downsides? I just want your personal opinion,
sure.
Like how we're going to deal with this.
Yeah, well, October 31st, as you know, Councillor Davis, being a farmer, it gets fairly cold. So being outside on November 1st isn't going to be that ideal. And in my opinion, October 31st we might wrap up that aspect of our extended service earlier, just based on people's comfort of being outside in mid-October. So I think that the time frame that the liquor board put out is extremely fair, and for the hospitality industry as a whole, for the most part, it's a bit of a seasonal industry. It's busier in the summer and not as busy in the winter time. So that decrease in business come November, December, January might be a natural fit to kind of what I would say close up those extended service areas. So I think that's a pretty natural fit, that, you know, if October 31st is the deadline for all of these extensions to go away, would make sense. But additionally to your question, for me, if this works and it, you know, from a socially distanced way and from a business perspective, I would like to actually apply to the LCRB and the township for a structural change to increase my occupancy and keep something like that permanent.
Say put a tent up with heaters or something like that, or, you know, or maybe expand it. Like, sorry, I interrupted you. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. What I was thinking about is, even though it gets cold, sometimes people can get creative on making quaint little decks, you know. Sorry, I'll let you finish. I interrupted. I'm sorry.
No, your point is great. For us, our plan is to put picnic tables out there and umbrellas, so no heaters or anything like that. And maybe that's part of the guidelines, is that restaurants are not putting in a large structure that would make it comfortable to be out there in the middle of winter. So it's more of a seasonal, summertime, temporary thing, which it is, and kind of only used for the summertime, instead of putting up a huge, you know, 40 by 40 tent and covering it that way. That seems a little extreme to me, and it should be more viewed as a seasonal patio with no heaters or anything like that.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Councillor Ferguson.
Okay, is this working now?
Yep.
Okay, oh, great. Okay, this conversation, I have to tell you, is making me hungry. Mr. Verhoff, Lance, thank you for coming, and I have to push for the trading post. Of course, you coming today, obviously, you're representing quite a few people in your delegation. Some folks you might not know you're representing because you're here and we're asking you all sorts of questions. But we do appreciate you coming as a delegation. As you know, we are a child of the province. Municipal government responds and reports to provincial government accordingly. So it was good that the province made some moves. And we have to do our part, of course. And as we said already, mentioned already, that there's going to be a report and some suggestions and recommendations that we can decide upon. The first question I have, the 11 p.m., that's in the same outreach as neighborhood pubs. Is that not correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so you're asking for something similar to them. I know that I'm in the Brookswood Fernridge area, and we have one down the street, and they shut down, and we don't hear any more since. So it's a really good positive thing. And the neighbors go there sometimes, myself included. So basically, that would be something you would ask for. And as far as your operation, I know that I've driven by and noticed that you have that pickup window. I was driving by. My wife said, stop. And so we stopped, but you're so successful, too big a lineup. So I've been patient. I didn't stay, but at least I know it's there. It looked really good, and it looked like you're getting some positive response. But I know, as you said before, that people are suffering in that industry, and it's difficult. I hope things can get back to some sort of normality. But my last question, are you guys going to be holding the Somerset this year?
Unrelated, but definitely can answer it. We were trying to do a drive-in festival, as some of you may know. And on Friday, Bonnie Henry and the PHO said that there will be no events with more than 50 vehicles in a space. So that was pretty much the last blow to a bit of an outlandish idea to start with. So the answer is no. But,
okay, thank you very much, Lance.
You're welcome.
Councillor Kunst.
Thank you. That's it, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks. Councillor Kunst.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for coming. And yeah, too bad about the drive-in. I just love the creativity of some of these businesses over the last few months. I had a question. So you said you sent in an application to the LCRB. Do you know how long it will be before you you can hear back, or you can start, doing your to increase your area of service?
Yeah, great question, Councillor Kunst. We have not heard anything from the LCRB in terms of how long this is going to take on their side of things. But my guess is that going through the process, basically all they wanted to know was the licensee number and the proposed area for the new temporary extension. So it was not a lot of information, and it even said on the application, you can even hand draw it. So my guess is that they want to push these through very quickly, and they're going to have hundreds, if not thousands, of these applications. My guess is that they're going to look at it, and if they see any major issues, they'll reach out to that hospitality group and sort out the issues. But my guess is that it's going to be a matter of days or weeks instead of 6 months like a normal structural change application takes.
Right. So have you experienced a lot of red tape as far as that goes, like with either the township or with the province, that's making this really difficult, or you're just kind of, you got to the end of it now anyways?
Are you talking for this specific situation?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been great. I mean, I think that we're seeing a lot of municipalities and the liquor board try to be innovative in ways that they can help the hospitality industry. One of those ways was maybe about 2 months ago, they allowed for food primary locations to start selling packaged liquor out of their locations through the door for takeout. So, and we see these things move quite quickly. And so when there was talk about this extension of service by the LCRB, I probably heard it first about 2 or 3 weeks before last Friday, which is when they actually sent out the online submission. So I think that it's going to be a very quick turnaround time, and I'm thinking that we could potentially have an okay from the LCRB by the end of this week.
Okay, good. Well, wishing you all the best, and say hi to the family.
Will do. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much. I don't see any further questions, and thank you for your delegation. I know you're speaking on behalf of the brewers, but this certainly goes beyond your piece of the industry, and I think council will be looking at the bigger picture. But we do appreciate your insight. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, so now we'll move back to our agenda, and on the agenda, so Ms. Bauer, do we need a motion to receive the memo? Because the C1 says that council received, so maybe I'll get a motion to receive.
Move to receive.
Second receipt.
Moved and seconded by Councillor Ferguson, moved by Councillor Davis. Yeah, there's 2 memos, Mr. Backen. Yeah, the one from today and the previous one. That's right. So we're received both of those. So the moved and seconded discussion. This is on receipt. Councillor Long.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. And based upon today's memo, I'm not sure how you want to proceed, but there's suggestions of a couple of motions that kind of cover my concerns that were in the notice of motion, which I sent in about a week and a half ago, because I've been on top of this since then. So I don't, I guess we'll just accept these, and then perhaps when it comes to that, we can move some of these motions that are in the memo.
That's right. So yeah, so we'll do the receipt, and then we'll move on to the recommended motions. And I know your motion will be mute, basically, at that point.
Yeah, I think these are even nicer, except there's too many whereases.
Yeah, never too many. Councillor Richter.
Now you only had 3.
Councillor Richter.
Yes, thank you. I'm just wondering what page, I take it was in items distributed today?
It's a separate email, so certainly once we do receipt, I'll let you. I'm going to ask council if they've had an opportunity to read it.
Well, I haven't, because that's what I'm asking. Where is it?
It's an email sent to you.
Oh, it was an email sent. Okay.
Yes, prior to the meeting, but we're just going to receive it now. And then before we move on, I want to make sure everybody's read it. So.
Okay.
Councillor Kunst on receipt.
Yeah, so I do have an item for other business, and
we're just doing receipt.
Wineries. Okay,
yep.
So
we'll include that in the discussion.
Okay.
So we're just doing receipt. Councillor Davis.
Yeah, Is this, this is from Ram and Steffi, right?
Yes, came today and there's one on Friday also. Yeah.
Yeah, there's just one of them, and it's from memorandum item C1 and E1. That's it?
Yeah, what's the date on it that you have, the one you have?
Oh, 11:39 a.m. this morning.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Latest one. Councillor Long?
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. So we're receiving both of them, but is the one that came today supposed to replace the one that was from Friday? Or are there in conjunction?
Based on the newest information from the province, it's one that I think supplements it, and so it's more current. So that's why the one came out today, because the previous one was written prior to the province's.
Yeah, I understand. So then this one replaces or a supplement? I guess it supplements.
Supplements, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor of receipt? Are there any opposed? Okay, carries unanimously. Now on the memo, there are some recommendations. And I just want to get to it. So the recommendations, I think, is very appreciative to staff to do that, because I know certainly they have the opportunity to delve into it deeper. And listening to the delegation, he talked about the dates. So the date there's 6 points. On the 6th point is October 31st. There's one September 30, but really that's only for a report back to council. It doesn't change anything, but at least it will give us an opportunity by the end of September to see how it's going. Now, before I ask for a motion, Mr. Backen or Mr. Seffi. So, Mr. Seffi, if you can give some background, and also I know a question will be coming from Councillor Kuntz regarding wineries, the wineries that we have throughout the Township of Langley and the Agricultural Land Reserve. How do they fit into this, and are they included in this if they need to expand their tasting rooms because they can't comply with the 50% of occupancy? So if you could give the background and maybe answer that question, that'd be helpful.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was going to suggest, if it's helpful, Your Worship, I could share my screen, which will show Council the memorandum that was distributed today. And thank you for clarifying that it actually supplements the memo that was issued to ensure that it was received by Council at the time that the agenda was being prepared, which was on Thursday prior to Council receiving, or actually the province releasing the announcement on Friday. So this supplements that.
Yeah, if I could just interrupt, maybe before we go any further, I just want to know if all members of council have had an opportunity to read this memo. And if they haven't, then we'll pause for a bit, but if they have, then we'll carry on with your presentation. Is there anybody, maybe you can just unmute and let me know if you need some time?
Actually, Jack, I just found it. I would appreciate having 5 to 10 minutes to review this.
So why don't we pause for, maybe take a little bit of a break for 10 minutes. Let's review it, and we can have a little bit of a break, and we'll come back. Mr. Seppi, if you can just hold on to your presentation, we'll be back. It's let's say 5-2. That gives us 8 minutes. That's a compromise. Okay.
Would you like it on the screen, Your Worship, or no? Just leave it.
I'm sorry. Was that Mr. Seppi?
Would you like it on the screen? Would it be helpful on the screen or not?
Yeah, put it on the screen. That's fine.
Yeah, it's easier for me to read on the screen.
Yeah. We'll reconvene at 5-2. So we'll just take a short recess.
Ms. Bauer, could you allow me sharing, please?
It's 5-2, so reconvene the meeting. So, Mr. Steffi, there are some speakers, but perhaps we'll let you go through your presentation, and then the questions to you, and then we'll put the recommended motion under consideration for council. So, Mr. Steffi.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have left the memorandum on the screen. If you wish me to stop sharing, I will do that upon your instructions, Your Worship. But I thought it might be useful for us to refer to as we have the discussion. A couple of points that have been made, but it's worth reiterating. One is that the previous memo was prior to the provincial release of the announcement on Friday, May 22nd, which provided for an expedited process for processing of liquor license applications expanding onto patios. So this memorandum that was released today, that was issued by staff today, augments and supplements the previous memo that was presented to council prior to the provincial release of their announcement on Friday. The second point, Your Worship, is that staff has tried to understand what the province did release on Friday to the extent possible. A number of staff have been working on evaluating the process as envisaged by the province, and what is being presented is in light of that research and analysis. And the third point, Your Worship, is that the fundamental, I guess, obligations of local government do not get affected by such releases. And just to, I guess, state a couple of those obligations being the fair and reasonable treatment of applications, the requirements for council to, I guess rather to rephrase that, the prohibition against council extending any profit or benefit to business, that remains the same. So without compromising, I guess, councils or I guess exposing council to the potential challenge by an individual of unfair treatment, the memorandum has been very careful and has been based on legal advice over the weekend as to how best to deal with this current situation, which has been referred at many levels as being unprecedented, within the parameters that the province has provided, while sticking to the fundamental premises of not extending benefit to any particular sector or individual or group, but rather providing this new direction, A, on a temporary basis, and B, making sure that council is doing this in the best interest of the public as a whole. So these are fundamental premises that are captured in the whereases, and that's why there are too many whereases, as Councillor Long referenced, but they're important in setting the stage, in making sure the public understands why it is that council is doing this, if council wishes to go down this road. So having said that, I guess there's a couple of key distinguishing features that have been referenced in the previous memorandum. That being, is the extension of the area, expansion of the area being requested, is it private property or is it public property? That is key. The other thing that the memorandum has tried to deal with is this fundamental, I guess, concept of getting away from individual cases or a review on a case-by-case basis, fully cognizant and appreciative of the fact that a review such as a case-by-case would add, by necessity, inevitably, added timelines for a review, whether it's at staff level or a council level, unless there is a fundamental blanket, if you will, a guiding principle, a policy that deals with all, then it requires a one-on-one or a case-by-case analysis and a review. So the resolution that's being presented to council tries to minimize red tape, if you will, bureaucracy or processing, to put it another way, to the extent possible. So with that, it captures all of the various types of licenses, as well as restaurants as a whole, as being in the same category, in that there is really no distinction being made when council is considering the use of a patio, whether it's private property or public, whether a property, whether an establishment, a business, has a license to serve alcohol or it doesn't. That was at least the initial staff thought, that council may wish to deal with cafes and restaurants that do not necessarily serve alcohol the same way as council may wish to deal with those that do have a license to serve alcohol. That's why in the preamble, you'll see that there is a reference made to the hospitality sector, restaurants, cafes, pubs, breweries, wineries, distilleries, and cideries as being collectively referred to as restaurants. And then within the parameters that the province announced on Friday, there are two, I guess, options for local governments to consider. And that's where I'm scrolling back up on the first page of the memo and highlighting, if you will, these two areas where council is, or local governments are able to deal with applications on a blanket basis. That's option one. A pre-approval of all liquor primary and manufacturer establishments. And then the second part is on a case-by-case basis, individual application basis. And as I said earlier, the second option, should council wish to go down that road, by its nature, adds a little bit more time. Obviously, staff will try to expedite that to the extent possible, but as a matter of, I guess, integral part of the nature of the option, it has to have a sense of individual review and approval. Then, Your Worship, we go down the other, I guess, avenue, the other approach of dealing with private property differently than private property. So what staff has tried to do is go down option one and then break it down into sub options A and B. So the resolution that you see being presented for council consideration, the first one from A to E, are intended to deal with the blanket option, but in such a way that it deals with private property differently than private property. So we're asking council, or should council wish to go down this road, council being asked to pass a resolution that would essentially suspend on a temporary basis the requirements of the township's parking requirements of the zoning bylaw until such time as council sees fit, or at least until end of October this year. The second provision of this direction, this policy approach, would be for council to consider suspending its development permit guidelines, which encapsulate and capture heritage conservation area requirements as well, because heritage conservation or heritage alteration permit is in essence a form of a development permit. So this is a more broad statement to suspend development permit requirements where applicable for temporary structures. That is the second provision. And there's a reason why this is being referred to a specific staff position, because again, based on legal advice, this cannot be a generic staff, because there needs to be a process for an appeal. And that's why a specific staff position is identified here. So these two deal with a blanket provision for use of private property for expanded service area. And then item C deals with public property, in that a highways use permit is still necessary to be issued, and that would be based on the provisions of policy 05-009, which has specific guidelines that was adopted by council as late as 2018, as I recall, that specifies safe pedestrian circulation corridors before a permit may be issued for the use of public space. The delegate referenced a specific establishment in Fort Langley as potentially having the sufficient sidewalk space, the second delegate, and that was, I think, Little Donkey, and that would be subject to the policy of council that's referenced in this particular resolution, and subject to a highways use permit issued by staff. And finally, Your Worship, the requirement for staff to report back to council if anything goes wrong, if there are issues being raised to staff or council that requires a review in the meantime, and if not, at the very latest, by end of September, such that council has a good handle as to how things may have transpired before council decides to, I guess, reconsider this. And with that said, Your Worship, if council wishes to not go down the path of 1A and B, but rather go down the path of 2, which is council's prerogative to review these things on a case-by-case basis, then council can consider this subclause E, which requires a case-by-case review of all applications regardless of where they are. And in addition to that, or supplemental to that, staff felt that it may be something that council may wish to consider, and that is again something that the delegate made reference to, and that is the fees. And certainly staff sees some reasonableness to being able to waive those fees at council's direction on a temporary basis, and that is the reason behind the last paragraph of the second page, which is regarding fees. With that, Your Worship, I'll end, and maybe I'll stop sharing and ask if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Sefi. I really appreciate that explanation. Certainly, you've done a lot of work, and it's good to know that there's legal advice behind this to ensure that what we do is appropriate and does not. One thing we have to do is protect the corporation of Langley, that we don't expose ourselves to any legal issues. So thank you for that. Couple of questions. The delegation had mentioned an extension of the bylaw, the noise bylaw, from 10 to 11, and just in discussion in the break, under A, if council chooses, would it be appropriate to add and noise limitations up to 11 p.m. on that, and that would that cover sufficiently the request to relax the noise bylaw?
Certainly, Your Worship. If that's something that council wishes to do at a staff level, it was decided, or at least it was felt, not decided, it was felt that because of its nature, we're dealing with noise, which is very subjective, and it may vary from site to site. And council may wish to err on the side of caution and not provide that as a blanket approval and wait until something comes up, keeping in mind the fact that our bylaws are always subject to a complaint before we take enforcement action anyway.
That's right. So, yeah, so to deal with that, if we left it alone and not put this in, staff can still deal with it based on complaint. But if there's a complaint to, let's say, a certain restaurant the delegation operates in Fort Langley, then we would enforce it, or it is one of those things. I know it's sensitive to the neighborhoods and difficult for us to give a blanket waiver on that, but what would you recommend? Just leave it for now and go on a case by case, or perhaps you come back with some more information at the next meeting? I don't think it's urgent to change the noise bylaw at this point, but maybe having more information or certainly staff's recommendations. What would you recommend?
Yes, Your Worship, the recommendation would be to not include a blanket statement about noise, as I said, at this point, and await further input, feedback from the community and business owners before council may decide to go down another path.
Okay. And the other question on wineries and distilleries in the agricultural land reserve, does this apply to them also?
Your Worship, this applies to all such establishments, but does not require additional approvals from anybody, keeping in mind that this is not adding to the occupant or to the capacity of an establishment. This is to offset what they cannot do within the building.
Okay, thank you. I'll open up to questions from council. Councilor Richter.
I'd like to make a motion.
Well, this is questions of staff first, then we'll take a motion.
All right.
Okay.
Please put me on the list for motion.
Yeah, I'll keep you on for that.
All right. I have some questions about what's in front of us, and I just wanted to get clarification, because I think the intent of what it is that we want to do here is to make it as easy and painless as possible for these businesses to recover from the closures that they've experienced under COVID-19. So I just want to make sure that what we put forward will make it as easy and painless as possible for those businesses. So first of all, with regards to the use of the word restaurants in the motion, it's not in quotations, and read literally, it just means restaurants. If the intent is to include restaurants, cafes, pubs, craft breweries, wineries, distilleries, cideries, then I think they all have to be listed in the motion. And now, also in the motion, it says that the Mr. Safey can waive in his discretion. Now, what exactly does that mean? What would his discretion apply to? Because I think what we've heard in the emails that have come in, as well as from the delegation that we've had, is get rid of the fees right now, from now until October 30th. Like, just waive all the fees. They've got enough to do. The third question that I have is, are tents included? So, for example, the trading posts there, they want to go into their parking lot. Obviously, not every day is going to be a sunny day. Can they put a tent up without having to get permission from council and or staff in order to do that? And I'm wondering as well, with regards to extending to already approved and licensed special events areas, particularly for the wineries and the cideries down in the South Langley, because they have, I know we've had applications come in front of us with regards to these special events areas. We've approved some. I would just like to see them be able to capture the use of those special event areas in order to expand their occupancy up to where their occupancy should be. And finally, with regards to the noise, is it possible for us to relax the noise to midnight, provided outdoor patio music is shut off at 10 p.m.? And if we did that, then we could hear back from the public. I don't imagine we'd have a lot of pushback after if we cut the outdoor music off at 10 p.m., but allowed them to stay open for quiet discussions amongst tables and so on. So those are my questions for now, but I'm particularly wondering about the temporary service areas being included in this, as well as the fees. Thank you.
Mr. Safey, can you respond to those points, questions?
Thank you, Worship. In terms of the reference to restaurants being in quotation marks, the very first whereas statement does identify what restaurants mean.
Okay, well, just hold there, Mr. Safey. The whereases, as the mayor has indicated on several occasions before, do not constitute part of the resolution.
Yes, I understand, Councillor Richter.
Yeah.
I was just getting at, if council wishes, certainly that can be replaced in the actual resolution with the types of restaurants or not the types of establishments that are identified in the whereas statement can replace the word restaurants in the actual resolution, if that's what council wishes.
Okay, well, I think we need to be very specific that we're including all of them.
Yep.
Yep. So that whereas we could just include that in, that's that first whereas, include that in the motion. So when we come down to the motion, okay, that would solve that. Okay.
The second point I think Councillor Richter raised, Your Worship, was regarding the discretion of General Manager of Engineering and Community Development. Again, the reference is included because of the fact that there's always a need for an identified individual or staff person such that their decisions could be appealed at a higher level. If it was left generally as staff, it would be difficult to argue that somebody's decision is final. That is why it's left there. If there's any ambiguity in terms of a specific situation, that is the, I guess, authority whose decision can ultimately be appealed to the CAO and ultimately to council.
Okay, but I'm just wondering if the intent, as I see it, the intent is to cut the red tape for these businesses to allow them to get back up into an operational mode where they can start recouping some of the monies that they need in order to stay in business for the rest of the year. So I'm just wondering if we need to play with the wording on that one a bit more to make it perfectly clear. We're not trying to put roadblocks up here. We're going to waive everything. But if something has to be appealed, it goes to Mr. Safey. Maybe that's the way we have to phrase it.
And the only areas that are referenced as having this discretion, if you will, is not in the meat of it, if you will, but rather in some of the subsidiary or accessory parts. So the enforcement of parking requirements is a given. There's no discretion given there. But where it comes to, for example, a development permit requirement, where applicable, this is where somebody could argue that their structure is not permanent or that is actually temporary. And that is where sometimes the need comes into play for somebody to take a look and say, okay, does this actually have a foundation? Is it bolted? Does it have some I guess, features that could be argued as being permanent?
Okay, but we're arguing that all of this is temporary. It's not permanent. If they want to come back, they're going to have to come back after October 31st to expand on a permanent basis.
But this refers to where a building permit may be triggered, and as such, a development permit triggered.
Okay, but we don't want to do that. We don't want to trigger development permits. We just want them to get back in business.
As we heard from Mr. Verhoef, somebody else or Mr. Verhoef could come forward with an application that would say this structure, and it could be a substantial structure, is temporary, whereas it would look and feel and smell and everything else like a permanent feature.
Okay.
So we want to make sure that we capture those types of situations.
Okay, so can we not change the wording to say if anything looks like it's not temporary, it has to come back to us? Okay, well, I wasn't getting that from the wording, which is why I'm questioning it.
Well, all it says is that somebody has to make a determination. And right now it says general manager engineering. That could certainly be changed to somebody else or to council. It just might add another layer of processing.
Okay.
That's the only thing.
Tents.
And finally, in terms of the requirement for...
I asked about tents. Tents was my third one.
The tents, yes. The installation of tents, as long as they're bolted rather than placed into a foundation, would be deemed to be a temporary structure. So they can be included without the need for triggering a building permit or a development permit. They are clearly a temporary structure.
Okay, so is there a need for us to put that example into the resolution? For example, a tent that is bolted is not considered a permanent structure.
I think as soon as you provide a for example, then it could be argued why was not another example provided. That is really what we're trying to accomplish. Given the timelines and the need for us to act quickly, we didn't have the actual memo reviewed by legal counsel, but based on past practice, that has always been the case, to be careful not to put too much information and just sufficient to capture the intent.
Okay.
And as far as special events are concerned, they are not captured because they may require approval of the Land Commission. This is something that is dealing with a license or a licensee in terms of, as the intent in the whereas statements captures, in terms of offsetting what they're currently unable to accommodate as capacity within the existing building, and need to offset that with outside areas, either on parking lots or existing patios. So it does not deal with special events.
But if they've already got approval for special event area, can we not allow them to expand into that special event area to allow them to recoup their occupancy on a temporary basis?
We'll have to consider that a bit more in depth, Your Worship, because I believe it's a moot point, because the special event area, again, as long as they're not increasing the capacity, can be used for as part of the licensed area.
Okay, so they can use special events area as part of the licensed area.
That's correct.
Okay, can we specify that?
It could be added on at a later date, I think, if it becomes an issue.
I could add it in as a part, because what I'm really looking for here is a blanket resolution so that these people can get on with it. We've given them the permissions that they need under our regulations. They will have whatever permissions they need under the provincial regulations. So if we pass this today, there should be no reason why they can't start doing this tomorrow if they want to.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. And then the last one was about the noise.
Yes, thank you for the reminder, Councilor Richter. As mentioned earlier, I believe this is very much a subjective thing. So to change the, or to include in this blanket, if you will, policy direction, provisions that go beyond 10 o'clock, whether it's 11 or midnight, I believe may result in future issues and concerns having to be dealt with by council. I believe to try and not fix something that is not broken might be the best approach.
Okay, but is there anything prohibiting us from saying you can have outdoor noise until midnight, but you just can't have music outdoors after 10 p.m.? Because it seems to me it's the music that creates most concerns with surrounding residents.
Your Worship, again, that could create some challenges in the enforcement of the issue, because remember, we're dealing with noise, not the type of noise. We're talking about decibel levels. So people talking and being loud and rowdy could actually be louder than I don't know, iPhone with a couple of small speakers.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Safey. And
Councilor,
Mr. Mayor, I just want to, I think I will propose some amendments if we don't already have them coming forward.
Okay,
just, but I won't put them on until after the motion's in place,
so
okay?
I appreciate that. What we might do, and I'll refer to Mr. Backen once we've done this discussion, is to, it might be one way is to take this motion, move it and pass it, and then subsequent motions. Mr. Backen, I know we had a discussion to try and keep the spirit of this flexibility for staff. Mr. Backen, maybe you can comment on that right now, and then I'll go on to the speakers.
Thank you, Your Worship. There are two ways to deal with it. One is to actually try to incorporate the comments into the motion as it's moved. I guess the second way would be to actually adopt the motion and then to amend it, or prior to adopting the motion, amend it, or third, do some options following the adoption of the motion. I think we can make that decision once we hear from council as to the rest of the comments.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so we'll bear that in mind. Councilor Whitmarsh. You're muted, Councilor Whitmarsh.
There you go.
There you go.
Thank you. Yeah, so I appreciate the lots of the comments that have been made about this. I'm certainly supportive to move forward. So I guess I didn't really have a lot of questions. I'm ready to move and make this a motion as soon as we're ready to go.
Thank you, Councilor Long. Did you wish to ask questions, or are you ready? Do you want to make the motions? I just want to go this.
No, I'm ready to make the motion.
Okay.
But I would caution us on all these potential amendments.
Yeah.
I would be concerned about Mr. Bakken's comments because we haven't. There's 8 of us, 9 of us, and we can't all do like Councilor Richter does and take 10 minutes and give all these comments. Now, I'm not trying to be rude, please, but there are a lot of information in those comments, and I have an issue with all of them.
Yeah.
But let's move ahead and make sure that we support staff. A lot of work has been done on this, and when you're ready to, considering I sent a motion in already over a week ago, when you're ready, I'd like to make the motion to go up to one.
Okay, thanks, Councilor Davis. Questions of staff?
Well, I and Bob, I guess as long as you get to debate them, you're okay. But if you don't, then you don't want to hear them. Okay, maybe I should just be very quick then, considering I'm concerned about. It's one thing to waive a fee, but I think we need to have it accompanied by a permit, because then we have control and we know what's going on out there. The other thing is, this is not about fast tracking new liquor licenses. This is liquor licenses that Councilor Richter said that were restaurants and pubs or whatever that were already in motion when COVID hit. And my last comment is Glover Road is a provincial highway. What about ICBC's opinion on working our way out into the road? There's certain roads we own, but there are certain roads that we don't own. And I'm just going to throw that out there, and I'll shut up in a minute. What about ICBC when we go out into a parking spot and build a bit of a deck or whatever, and how is that going to affect insurance? Anyhow, okay, I'll, at that point, Bob, Councillor Long, I understand. So maybe I just wanted to throw those three things out.
That's a good question. I like
Mr.
that.
Seppi?
Thank you, Worship. The resolution that is in front of council does discuss public spaces. That includes all public spaces, whether under jurisdiction of the Township of Langley or TransLink. Having said that, there is no contemplation. So let me be clear. There is no discussion whatsoever at this point about use of the traveled portion, the vehicular traveled portion of public space for patios. It is only the sidewalk. And we're recommending that such use be limited to sidewalks only, and only when it's safe to do so, giving appropriate clearance and corridor to pedestrians and people with disabilities and people on wheelchairs and people pushing buggies, etc., etc. So this is not to be confused or mistaken with the vehicular portion of the road, which the province of BC actually has come up with recommendations on, that requires those types of provisions to be only implemented during daytime, for example. So if we are going to be thinking about putting cones up to block off a certain current parking area, for example, a parking lane on a road, to dedicate that to a potential future patio or expansion of a restaurant business, we have to keep in mind the cost implications for the municipality in terms of the staff resources that are needed to go out and put the cones in the morning and then take them out in the evening. So that kind of a provision has not been taken into account, and it's only sidewalks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kunst.
Oh, hi there. Yeah, so I do appreciate all the comments, and I think Councillor Richter touched on what I was, hoping to chat about a little bit. But I just want to, the memo is quite long, so I just want to make sure it captures that for the wineries, the issue of one of the comments was waiving the right to comment, the Township of Langley, that it actually makes the whole process take longer. I wonder if Mr. Safey could comment on that. Because if we waive that right, it would expedite the process and it would not trigger a development permit. So I was just wondering if you could clarify that.
Your Worship, with your permission, thank you, Councillor Kunst. Again, if you, Councillor Kunst, if you have time, take a look at the two options that the province has provided for municipalities to choose. One discusses pre-approval to cover all liquor primary and manufacturer establishments. That includes wineries.
Yeah.
The other option discusses the review and approval of all individual applications of all liquor primary and manufacturer expansions. So if we were to choose the second option, which is not part of the resolution, unless council decides to adopt E as well, if we choose that, that would by its nature mean that we will have to require all applicants to submit individual applications to the Liquor and Cannabis Regulating Branch, which would then have a couple of boxes for them to check. They're actually requiring applications or applicants to tick whether the municipality where they're located has decided to approve all liquor primary and manufacturing establishments, or if the municipality has decided to review them on an individual basis. If it says the second, if you go with the second approach, then that would then allow the Liquor and Cannabis Control Branch to circle back to the municipality and say, okay, what are your thoughts about this application? So by its nature, the way it's structured, it requires another level of administration. And again, we're providing council with both options. If council wishes to take advantage of that second option, all council needs to do is adopt option or subclause E as well.
Okay.
I hope that answers the question.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Arneson?
Yes, thank you, Worship. I do appreciate the fact that we have been given what I consider to be a fairly prescriptive and somewhat easy to adopt, I guess, policy guidelines with respect to something that's come up most immediately. And I wish in a perfect world, I'd maybe had access to the fact that staff was going to provide this, because in the absence of this information, I was going with rather a more expansive model that's been undertaken by some communities who are looking most broadly about, I'm just going to refer now to the correspondence we received May 14th, 2020, and in particular, the memorandum from Vancouver, Councillor Kirby Young. And really, it is meant to address, I thought, a larger scope of opportunities than the ones that most immediately could do this tomorrow, for example, if we authorized it. And so my perspective is a broader perspective and looking at the opportunities that this particular memo doesn't discuss. Now, I think it's a wonderful memo. It covers off things, legal liability, it's vetted by our lawyers, it's got different components to it. But I'm wondering whether we wouldn't be better served if we could consider something that was more of a hybrid, where you had opportunities where something fit into this category, they could start right away. But for example, I'm looking at things that other communities have considered, such as parklets and street parking, where you cordon off an area and you put in a patio. You know, there's all sorts of things that are very creative, because my concern is the type of industries and businesses that we're talking about. There's a huge amount, and often I think that they're very unique, and some of their circumstances. For example, one of the options in some communities was allowed to have patio service on grassy areas that were adjacent. And I know we're trying to divide this up between public and private, but I think that we are going to miss the mark if we don't look at expanding opportunities, because if I count on my fingers how many months this is intended to go to on an emergency basis to try and get it going, it's really only from June, practically speaking, till the end of October. And I personally don't believe that if I had just been able to somewhat dig myself out from my financial deficit because of COVID, suddenly, just at the onset of November, that I'm suddenly not going to have a patio outside. I don't think that that's realistic. So I think that we should be a little bit more expansive, like I said, in looking at how we can provide those opportunities. And for, like I said, a hybrid for me would cover off those ones that could conform most immediately and take advantage of our relaxation. But for the other ones who are going to bring a proposal forward, I really think they should be given the opportunity to make sure that we are allowing them to survive this terrible business depression until they can get out from under. And I went through quite a bit of due diligence personally to look at all these options. So I'm hoping at some point to be able to include that kind of verbiage into the overall motion in some way, so as to give some direction, to give discretion to staff to look not necessarily each one on a case-by-case basis, but not necessarily completely on a blanket approach either. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Councillor Richter, did you have a question for staff? Then I'm going to move to Councillor Long. Councillor Richter?
Yeah. I just wanted to say Councillor Long was making a comment about how we've got this motion in front of us, or this motion that was presented in this report. I would just like to point out the council got the motion at 2:44 p.m. today. We were given 8 minutes to review it until 2:55 p.m. today. And this is one of the reasons why I thought we should just have a meeting that was dedicated solely to the topic of outdoor patios, so that we could look at all the different variations. And certainly Councillor Arneson has just raised a very good point. We even saw it in the original report, which we got on Friday, I guess it was, about food trucks. Where do food trucks fit in? And can we put food trucks near the parks? They would be a hybrid model. So in terms of what Mr. Saifi has said, it sounds to me like what's complicating this is because we've got option 1 and 2, and within option 1 and 2, we have sub options A and B. It sounds to me, if we want to make this as painless as possible for the businesses out there, we should be going with option 1A. Open it up, blanket approach, and leave it at that. But I do still want to include a specification or clarification about special events areas, because I know the wineries are affected by this one, that they be allowed to use their special events areas, which have already been licensed as well, in order to recoup business on a temporary basis from June until October.
Thank you. Okay, thank you for that, Council and Mr. Saifi. So it sounds like moving A, B, C, and D, and then that last paragraph, therefore be resolved, not moving E, gives the most flexibility to staff. Also, taking the words from the first whereas, that list, and incorporating it into, what is that? Incorporating into the motion.
Therefore be resolved, yeah.
Yeah, so adding that in there. So that is clear. It adds that list. So maybe we can start with that.
Well, I would move option 1A.
What do you mean 1A? There is
1A.
no 1A. There is no 1A. I don't know what you mean by 1A.
Yeah, it is. Motion... It's in the report. It's in the report on the first page. Yeah, the council has two options. 1, pre-approval to cover all liquor primary, or 2, review and approval. I'm saying no, not 2, 1. Yeah. And with that above in mind, then there's A, pre-approved for all establishments, or B, individual applications. So I'm saying 1A. And if the motion that is there reflects 1A, then that's the one I think we should be looking at.
Okay, maybe Mr. Saifi, from what I understood from your presentation, is this motion with the 4 points, and then the last paragraph encapsulates the most flexibility provided to staff. And I remember when we first started this whole COVID thing, we talked about being flexible and agile, and we want to assist our businesses to get up and running as fast as possible. But we still have a due diligence, and that's where having approval by the general manager, I think, is good. But it doesn't have to come to council. It saves an awful lot of time. Mr. Saifi, before I go to the motion, can you just help clarify that covers what Councillor Richter is asking for?
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess one quick comment. This goes beyond providing flexibility. This actually tries to, in anticipation of what council was potentially thinking, this tries to provide as streamlined a process for affected businesses as possible. That's the aim. Not to provide flexibility, but to be as streamlined as possible. With that in mind, council needs to keep in mind that if we go with option 1A, as Councillor Richter put it, that would essentially eliminate subclause C of the therefore paragraph. That being the use of public areas, public spaces, which means that then any restaurant or licensed establishment would be able to use any sidewalk that's adjacent to their business, regardless of its width, which means that they would be essentially obstructing pedestrian movement, which would then potentially put pedestrians onto the roadway, which would potentially put them at safety or compromise their safety. If that's the intent of council, then subclause C would then be removed. That's all that council needs to do.
Okay. So I think what we can do is we can entertain the motion. If council feels that they want to remove that, we'll do that by amendment. So Councillor Long, did you want to move?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I would like to move option 1, as been described. And I'm afraid to say you do need A and B, because we do want to have the ability for businesses to expand.
For clarity, on the second page, it starts at the therefore be it resolved. So the motion there has A, B, C, and D. And then there's that bottom paragraph. Do you want to move all of that? Because that's what it encapsulates.
Yes, all of it. And I'm not so worried about the word restaurants, because as you see, Your Worship, restaurants is capitalized because it is defined in the whereas. But if you want to add all those whereases instead of the word restaurant, I'm happy with that.
Sure, with that addition.
And that covers everything. So I'd like to make that motion. And I'd like
I'll second it.
It's moved by Councillor Long, seconded by Councillor Richter. And so
can I speak to that then?
Yes, you may speak to it.
Okay, so I've listened to all these the concerns that have been raised, and valid though they may be, but let's keep in mind that we are already saying in the A that this is pre-approval on private property. So that includes wineries and cideries. It's all on private property. So I don't think there's a concern to put special amendments saying they can expand the special events areas or anything else because they own all the property. So it's not going to be on public property. They can use, I suppose, whatever the liquor board will allow them to do. So that's going to be okay. And as far as noise, though, I mean, I know that we're not discussing these amendments at the moment, but council, let's be careful, because if you're going to do it for one, you got to do it for all. So if you're going to expand it, that means the party next door can go till midnight. And that means that the party in the park can go to midnight, because we're all trying to do something with COVID, or dance party in the street, physically distanced. So we'll have to be careful on that. And you can still operate in the hours that are allowed. You just can't make too much noise. Anyway, I don't want to muddy it up, but I think that the motion that's been put forward in front of us by staff, and I thank them for the diligence, complicated though it may look, what I've just moved, and which is the option one, seems to cover everything. And as Mr. Safey said, it not only provides flexibility, but it provides an extremely streamlined procedure, which I think could get people in business by the weekend. So I sure hope that that's what we're going to do. And if we have amendments, let's do them separately.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Richter.
Yes, I would like to put an amendment in. And the amendment that I would like to put in would be a new E, which would that we would extend TSA designation to already approved and licensed special events areas. And this would cover all of what the wineries need.
Okay. Second
by Councillor Davis. Mr. Seffi, that's just adds more clarity in my mind.
Redundant.
Yeah.
That's okay. Just add.
Get it in there. Add it.
It's saying the same thing. I understand. Mr. Seffi, is that correct?
Sure. That's correct, Your Worship.
Okay,
did Councillor Richter say in A or B?
She's adding it. She's
no,
adding
I'm talking about the actual motion.
Yeah, it's just
yes, that's what I mean. Yeah, to subclause A or B. Where do you want to add
No,
it?
I'm adding it as a new E.
A new E. Okay, thank you.
E is an Edward. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Discussion on that, Councillor Richter. Did you wish to
yes.
speak on it?
I think that this gives the broadest flexibility available, but I do have a question again for Mr. Safey. If we go with this motion, if it is amended or as amended, whatever, does that still mean that these people do not have to come to council, pay fees, and have a council hearing and go through all those hoops for the next temporary period?
That's correct, Your Worship. Just keep in mind, I think what was referenced earlier, I think it may have been Councillor Davis, that's that these relate only to existing licensees, not new ones, existing.
Existing, yes. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Your Worship, point of order there, information, because we've also, I forgot to mention that we're also doing that last therefore be resolved,
yes,
right?
I asked for that in your motion, yeah. The
yeah,
last paragraph.
And I'd like to also say, Your Worship, if you don't mind, that we're talking a lot about license, but this also covers those that are not licensed. Yeah. So if you have a cafe that you serve only coffee, or Starbucks or something like that, this will still cover that. So licensee is included, but you don't have to have a liquor license to be take advantage of this, right?
Yeah. Okay, I see no further discussion. I'm gonna call the question. All those in favor on the amendment?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, the amendment carries. Now on the motion as amended, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries unanimously.
All right.
So now, Councillor Arneson, you said you had some additional, but I think it covers in this, and we haven't had an opportunity to see it. If you feel it's
Your Worship,
something we could add, it possibly could be provided to us for the next meeting. I think we've covered quite a bit of ground this morning. This afternoon. I just want to make sure that you're comfortable with that after your comments.
Thank you, Worship. I have already just pre-submitted to Mr. Backen a copy of this. It's just a draft itemized list of considerations, and in light of the necessity, I would say, of expediting this, I'm not going to burden our process today with that. So if I can work on that and work with staff and maybe bring it forward as a motion for our next council meeting.
Fair enough. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Long.
Your Worship, Yeah. Is it please possible, because this is such a complicated memo, that right after this meeting, that staff will take exactly what we've passed and take it out of here, because you got all these other pieces, and just put it in one memo. And please issue that ASAP so I can pass that on to the several restaurants that keep phoning.
So staff did a real preliminary draft press release. So there'll be a press release, and we'll encapsulate
the exact wording of the motion.
The wording, so that it's very clear to go out before anything goes out, and council gets a copy of that. And Councillor Richter?
Yes, I just want to make sure that staff have the wording of the item E that I added in, which was extend TSA designation to already approved and licensed special events areas.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And the second question that I have, what about food trucks?
So Steffi,
are we going to deal with that today, or should that come back on the 15th?
Perhaps on the... We don't have a memo. We don't have any information. If you would like on the another business, or even now, I think you could do it now. Make a motion to ask staff to provide information on food trucks, particularly.
Okay, I would make that motion that we ask staff to bring back a recommendation regarding food trucks to the June.
May I provide some comments?
Yes, or a report. Yes, Mr. Sefi.
The memo that was included, that's on the council agenda package, memo C1, does reference food trucks and mobile food establishments. And it references the fact that staff will continue and process applications unless otherwise directed by council. So historically, mobile food trucks have been associated with special events, meaning that they did not individually need to go out and take a business license or take out a business license for their operation, whether it's on private property or on public property. That's been historically the practice. What staff is suggesting is that on a moving forward basis, that when we do look at business license applications for food trucks that are not associated with a special event, that they too be processed, subject to compliance with fire regulations and health regulations, that they be allowed to operate at an appropriate location, whether it's on private property, if it's zoned accordingly. So any property that's zoned for a restaurant could accommodate a food truck, or on public property where it's safe in terms of parks and other establishments. Now, that is the current suggested approach.
Okay, so do we need a motion to do that? Because that's what I'd like us to do. I think we need to get more people outdoors enjoying food and camaraderie at social distancing.
Your worship, there's no motion needed unless council wishes to not proceed with that. Then a motion would be necessary. Otherwise, staff will just proceed. Okay, I'm good with that then. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Sefi, when we do draft up that information item on, as Mr. Council Long had requested, maybe we can include something on food trucks, so we're clear on it. How that
Certainly. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Good discussion. So as I stated earlier, I'm not going to reconsider. Okay, Councilor Woodward's coming back in. Maybe I'll wait for my comments. Yeah. And obviously, Councilor Long's notice of motion is mute, so we're okay with that, Councilor Long? Yeah, thanks.
Well, I'll move termination.
Oh, not there yet. Just waiting for Councilor Woodward. Oh, there he's back. Welcome back, Councilor Woodward. So as I said, there's a delegation. And I know when we hear a delegation, quite often we don't like to act on it. There's a lot of information. So I feel it's not in the best interest of council for me to reconsider this. If there's any changes that need to be done, certainly can be done next meeting when we do hear back from staff. So with that, now other business in a special meeting, Ms. Bauer, is it as per all meetings? Or?
Yes, it would be as per all meetings.
Yeah. So is there any other business? Seeing none, I motion. Councillor, sorry, Mr. Backen has some other business. Mr. Backen.
No, Your Worship, it's not other business. It's to clarify D1, just so we're clear. We don't anticipate it coming back June 15th.
Okay.
The referral with this withdrawal now stands, so it's been referred to staff to process that. So we'll be doing so.
Yeah. So just to be clear, staff, the recommendation is for staff to talk to them, but then come back after this, certainly with information. They say, well, no, we can't. And then we're going to get that information. Then council can then proceed. Is that correct?
Correct.
And we can also make motions. Oh, so won't be the next meeting. Take a little bit more time. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So it is definitely coming back.
A report is coming back as per council's request last meeting.
Yeah. Okay.
Or information from staff. Okay. Okay. No other business?
Well, actually, I have a point of, so does this mean we are not reconsidering that motion next meeting?
No, we're not.
Just going to wait for the staff report.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So there's been no further, the direction stands. And so if staff come back, I mean, certainly it is a bit prescriptive, but if staff come back and say they've talked to him and this, you can't do it, then we have that option to proceed or not proceed. Council still has that.
I'd like to clarify that as well, Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yeah, sure.
So the motion that was passed in regards to that development wasn't wishy-washy, and it certainly wasn't to get a report. It was to direct the proponent to come back to the mixed use development. So if they come back and say we're not doing that or we can't do that, it would come back in the form of a staff report. But it would essentially be the proponent refusing the direction of council then.
Well, it doesn't have to refuse direction of council. It's just, I don't think I think we've all had experience. Council certainly requests staff to work with him, come back, but if he comes back with if it comes back with an alternative, then council can still consider it. It doesn't make it go away. We can still consider it and say no or yes or whatever, but that's up to council, not up to individuals. So
okay, thanks.
I didn't want to muddy it up. I think we had a lot of good information, and I think council can consider that too. And certainly, we want to work with our people in our community. We don't want to demand. Certainly work with them. That's always been our way. And this gave an opportunity for us to listen and hear and ask questions. And I don't think we want to demand anything, but certainly if they, come back with an alternative or this is what we can do or this is what we can't do, council still has the option to consider it in any way they wish. Okay, I think that helps. Okay, motion to terminate.
Termination.
Councilor Davis, seconder. Councilor Whitmarsh, all in favor? Any opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you very much for spending your Monday afternoon with me. Thank you. Bye.
Good night.